quorum is present, so I will call this meeting of the Madison Plan Commission of June 12th, 2023 to order. First, we have public comment. I don't think we have anyone wishing to speak, but I would like to ask Kevin to please comment on how we handle those communications that we get from the public. Kevin?
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick note, we'll obviously handle comments on a case-by-case basis, but those that require some level of staff follow-up, we certainly will. There are two newer ones in the list that I wanted to make note of. One was a comment that was the result actually of a staff conversation. So I believe we've been in contact with one, and another one had to do with some design concerns and then some potential concerns regarding debris around some construction sites, and staff is working on a response to both of those comments. So Chair, unless there's any other questions, that's the update I have on those right now.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot, Kevin. Next, communications, disclosures, and recusals. Members of the body should make any required disclosures or recusals under the city's ethics code. Are there any disclosures or recusals? Alder Field.
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to disclose that I used to be a tenant at one of the houses that would be demolished under the group of items 8 through 11, but I don't have any financial relationship with any of the owners, and that was a former landlord. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Alderfield. Are there any other disclosures or recusals? Seeing no raised hand. Next, we will move to the minutes of the May 22nd, 2023 regular meeting. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes? Kevin?
Oh, I just wanted to note, and perhaps we'll be getting into it in good order, but we did have the tech facilitator orientation or overview.
Oh, yes. Sorry. Thank you very much. Could we get our tech facilitator orientation? Sorry, I skipped that.
All right. Welcome to our virtual plan commission meeting. We'll cover a few basic items before beginning. If you lose connection at any point during the meeting, you can reconnect by clicking the link or calling the number in your original email. To members and city staff, members, if you are able, please activate your video and keep it on for the duration of the meeting. Staff, if you are able, please activate your video when you are speaking. Use the raise hand feature when you'd like to be recognized to speak or ask questions. Staff, click raise hand when you are asked a question. The chair will do their best to call on committee members in the order in which their hands are raised. Lowering your hand will take you out of the queue. Members of the public who have registered to speak, the name you entered in Zoom must match the name you entered in registration. You will remain muted until called upon. The clerk will tell you when your time is up. After speaking, a member of the body may ask you a question. If you need to share documentation with the commission, please send it to the email list in today's agenda. Chair, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jesse. I would just note that in terms of the testimony from speakers, we do take questions, but that is done after all of the registrants speak, not after each individual speaker. So just to make sure that everyone is clear about that. Going back to the minutes of May 22nd, 2023, are there any additions or corrections to the minutes? Seeing no raised hands, is there a motion to approve? Moved by Commissioner Solheim. Is there a second? Seconded by Alder Field. Commissioner Solheim, did you wish to speak to your motion? Okay. We will move to a vote, and I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Commissioner Cahill.
I'm going to abstain.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Heck.
Same for me, since I wasn't here.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Shepard.
I guess I'll jump into. I was not here, so I will abstain. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Other than those three abstentions, I will assume unanimous consent from the other members. And so the motion passes unanimously with the three abstentions. Then schedule of meetings. The next regular meeting is on June 26th. And then in July, we have a meeting on July 10th and 24th. And those are all virtual meetings, which will start at 5:30. Then we have a special meeting on June 22nd at 5 p.m. And that will be in person in the Madison Municipal Building, room 215. And that will cover several things, but primarily we will get into some information about trees and what authority the Plan Commission does or does not have over trees. And then also some information about electric vehicles and the market penetration and some other information about electric vehicles. Kevin, did you have anything that you wanted to add about the special meeting?
No, I think those are the big topics. Materials should be available for your review by the end of the week.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Next, we will move to the consent agenda. It is the custom of the Plan Commission to remove from the agenda those items on which the staff believes an application has had sufficient review to warrant approval with all of the conditions placed upon it by various city departments, on which the applicant accepts those conditions, and there are no individuals who have registered to speak in opposition to the item. These items are placed onto a consent agenda, and they are addressed at the beginning of our meeting, and then people interested in those items can sign off. Of those items before us today, the following are proposed for the consent agenda. Agenda item 4, Legistar 77590, located at 5202 High Crossing Boulevard, 17th Alder District. Consideration of a demolition permit to demolish a movie theater. Agenda item 5, Legistar 77591, located at 6323 through 6425 Odana Road, 19th Alder District. Consideration of a demolition permit to demolish a complex of 7 office buildings. Of those items, are there any requests for separation? Seeing no raised hands, I will open the public hearing. There are no registrants wishing to speak. I will close the public hearing. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda? Moved by Commissioner Solheim. Is there a second? Seconded by Alder Duncan. And we will go to a vote, and I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hands, the consent agenda passes unanimously. Then we have a new item of business under agenda item 2, Legistar 77432, adopting the Reiner Neighborhood Development Plan, which is a supplement to the City of Madison's comprehensive plan. We will hear from Urvashi Martin, who will give us an overview. Urvashi.
Thank you, Chair Zellers. Let me share my screen here. Can I get the screen sharing ability?
Jesse, can you give Urvashi screen sharing.
Okay. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Urvashi Martin. I work in the planning division. I'm here to present the draft Reiner Neighborhood Development Plan. Staff had provided an informational presentation to the Plan Commission on the draft plan last year at the June 27th meeting. After that, the draft plan was delayed until the complete Green Streets Guide was adopted to go through the adoption process. Following the adoption of the Complete Green Streets Guide and the incorporation of the recommendations from the Complete Green Streets Guide, the draft Reiner Neighborhood Development Plan was introduced to the council to go through the adoption process last month. And the plan was referred to the Board of Park Commissioners and the Transportation Commission for review. So in this presentation, I'll give a little bit of brief background in the beginning and then focus mostly on the changes that have been made to the draft plan since the last time staff presented to the Plan Commission, and also focus on the recommendations from the two committees that the plan was referred to. So a little bit of background about the planning area. It's on the northeast side of the city. The planning area is bounded by Felon Road and the railroad tracks on the west and north of the planning area. The town line between Town of Burke and Town of Sun Prairie forms the eastern edge, and then Thorson Road forms the southern boundaries. Almost all of the lands within the planning area are currently within the Town of Burke, with the exception of this lighter shade parcel to the south, which is within the city of Madison. The Town of Burke is expected to attach to the city of Madison by 2036 under a cooperative plan that exists between the city and the town. Area-wise, the planning area is approximately 1,480 acres. This area is mostly undeveloped. Some of the developments that currently exist include some town subdivisions. There are also some homes along existing roads, and also some commercial and industrial uses. And the planning area falls entirely within the Sun Prairie Area School District. So what this draft plan addresses, this is a future growth area of the city. So the plan provides guidance on future growth and development. And the draft plan includes recommendations for future land uses and housing types. For transportation, the plan recommends a street layout that can improve connectivity, recommends pedestrian and bicycle facilities and transit, also recommends park locations to serve future residents. The plan also sets aside areas that would be needed to meet stormwater requirements, and also recommends how public utilities like water and sewer will be extended to serve this area, and also sustainability. The plan outlines strategies and recommendations to advance sustainability. Some environmental features in this area. The topography is characterized by rolling hills. There's some steep slopes, 12% or greater, that are shown in the orangish shades on the map. There's also a watershed boundary that runs kind of middle of the planning area, shown in this dotted black line. The area to the west of that is located in the Starkweather Creek watershed study. Starkweather Creek watershed. And the area to the east of that is located in the Upper Koshkonong Creek watershed. There are also some wooded areas that are shown in the green color on the map. There are also a fair amount of wetlands and floodplains, especially the kind of the northern portion of the planning area. And in terms of soil conditions, hydric soils and hydric inclusions, those are shown in the lighter blue and lighter yellow shades on the map. An important consideration in this planning process was the Starkweather Creek watershed study that the city conducted in this area. This planning process was also paused for some time to be able to use the results from that watershed study to inform the stormwater recommendations in the plan. This map here is showing the results of that watershed study, which is showing the flooding that can occur from a 100-year storm event, and we have overlaid that on our land use recommendations. So you can see that a lot of areas that are identified for flood risk are recommended for stormwater and other open space in the plan. For the draft land use recommendations, just to highlight some of the changes that have been made to the land use recommendations since the last time staff presented to the Plan Commission. I'll start off from the kind of the northern portion. At the intersection of Nelson and Reiner Road, staff is proposing changing the future land use recommendation from neighborhood mixed use to community mixed use. This is a pretty major intersection and also transit corridor, which is why staff feels that this change is appropriate. Moving slightly to the east of that area, based on the feedback that we received from our sanitary sewer, we have scaled back the development to the extent that that this area could be served by gravity sanitary sewer. Otherwise, that would require a lift station. So we've scaled back the development so it can be served by gravity. Also, the park that is recommended to the north of this area, we have extended the park so it kind of fronts the pond at this location to kind of take advantage of that amenity. Moving slightly to the kind of the south east quadrant of Nelson and Reiner Road, at the direction of Plan Commission, we changed the future land use recommendation along Malley Road from employment to light industrial use. Slightly to the south of that, at the northwest corner of Burke and Reiner Road, we have made some slight modifications to the housing mix 4 that we were previously showing to reflect a wetland delineation that was done by a property owner here. Moving slightly to the kind of the southwest portion of the planning area, based on the feedback we received from city engineering, we removed the north-south street connection that we were previously showing here. That connection would have required a fair amount of grading, which is why we removed that street connection. The plan does show a proposed shared use path, the town center path, through that area. Moving to the east of that area, kind of south of Burke Road, west of Thorson Road, at the direction of Plan Commission, we are showing an overlay for long-term agriculture, which is shown in this hashed red mark area with the star. Kind of east of that area, east of Thorson Road, based on some further discussions with Parks Division staff for the existing Town of Burke Park, which is in the Conservancy Estate subdivision, where my cursor is, we are changing the recommendation, future land use recommendation of that park to stormwater and other open space. The reason why we are recommending that change is the way the park is currently configured. It doesn't have a very convenient access for nearby residents. It's mostly accessible by properties that share their lot line with the park. Also, the Starkweather Creek watershed study shows a fair amount of stormwater inundation on that property, which is why we are recommending this park east of that area. And we've made some slight modifications to the street layout here to accommodate that park location. Moving to the north of that area, north of Burke Road, we are showing an overlay for a potential school site, which is shown in this dotted green line. Based on our discussions with the Sun Prairie School District, the school district felt that the estimated residential development that we are showing in this plan can support a future school. And this location was selected for the potential school site as it's kind of conveniently placed in terms of its proximity to existing and planned school facilities in this area. Also, it has convenient access from Burke Road, which is a collector street and does not carry a lot of traffic. It's also adjacent to a future park location that's shown in the plan. The school district likes to locate schools closer to parks so that between the two facilities, there can be some sharing sharing of recreational facilities and also parking between the two uses. Also, the school site is recommended adjacent to proposed shared use path that we're showing in the plan right here, the proposed east-west greenway path. So that would provide access from that shared use path to the school site. I do want to note that there are a couple of public comments that were submitted by property owners expressing their concern regarding this potential school site that we're showing. For the draft transportation recommendation, the main change that has been made to the draft plan since the last time we presented to the Plan Commission, the detailed street cross sections that we were previously showing in the plan for arterial and collector streets were removed, and they were replaced by the complete green streets street typologies. So any planned improvements that are made to the street network within the planning area will be guided by the recommendations from the Complete Green Streets Guide. For the board committee commission review process, the draft plan was referred to the Board of Park Commissioners and the Transportation Commission. Staff presented the draft plan to the Board of Park Commissioners at their May 17th meeting. The Park Commissioners didn't have any questions for staff, and the plan was recommended for approval to the Plan Commission. At the Transportation Commission, staff presented the draft plan to the Transportation Commission at their May 24th meeting. The commission members had several questions. There was a question about if there has been any initial conversations with the Rail Commission on the two railroad crossings that are proposed in the plan. There was also a question about the intersection of Nelson and Reiner Road, how pedestrian and bicycle travel would be accommodated in that intersection. There was also a question about Burke Road that is recommended as a community connector in the plan, and what bicycle facility is envisioned for that street. There were also several questions about future transit that's shown in the plan in relation to the housing density that is proposed in the plan. There were some concerns about the housing mix 3 and 4 that is proposed along Nelson Road, east of Reiner Road, that does not show a future transit line in the plan. So the Transportation Commission recommended approval of the plan to the Plan Commission with the comment that the higher density in the plan be placed closer to the planned transit line. Staff's response to that comment is that the housing, the high intensity housing that's shown in the plan is within close proximity of the future transit lines that are shown in the plan. Staff did some further review and determined that the higher intensity housing, the housing mix 3 and 4 that are shown in the plan fall within a half a mile radius of the future transit lines that are shown in the plan. Staff has also noted some options or alternatives that are currently available under the current system that can provide some options until future transit is considered in this area. So the Sun Prairie Park and Ride lot is located just north of the planning area. It's less than 2 miles away from Nelson Road, and will be served by 3 transit routes under the Metro network redesign: Route A1, Route W, and Route S. There's also a bus stop just west of Nelson Road at High Crossing Boulevard that will also be served with Route A1, and that's approximately 1.5 mile away from west of this area along Nelson Road. Also, I just wanted to note that as new developments are proposed in this area, they'll also be subject to the city's new Transportation Demand Management Program, the TDM program. So that would require putting in measures in place to reduce the number of single occupancy vehicle trips from the development. And that could include any number of measures from van pool, carpool, ride sharing, emergency ride home programs, or teleworking and other options. So that concludes my presentation, and I'll turn it back to Chair Zellers and will be available for questions.
Thank you, Urvashi. Are there any questions of Urvashi? Commissioner Heck.
Thank you. Urvashi, I just wanted, maybe it's my own faulty memory, but I wanted to make sure I understand the usage of the word overlay in this context. I'm used to thinking of Chapter 28 and zoning overlays, and that's not what this is, I understand. But is that common in neighborhood development plans to use the term overlay? And is an overlay, does it have equal status as the underlying land use map, or is it kind of like, I'm used to seeing alternatives, alternative A, B, C used in some plans. Is this new, or am I just not remembering this?
Yeah. So in some other neighborhood development plans, also the overlays are shown, but I think the interpretation of that overlay is mostly like a alternative or a kind of a flexibility kind of built in the plan. So, for example, the potential school site that is being shown as an overlay. So it's giving it kind of builds in kind of a flexibility in the plan that if that area that's shown for a school is not built, then it will be developed with the underlying land uses and street network that's shown in the plan. So it's kind of gives you that option.
So would you say that those two different recommendations more or less have equal status in the plan?
I think that the land use, the underlying land use recommendation probably has more weightage in the way the land use are described, because it's a land use designation. What the overlay does is that it gives you that option that if the area is considered for a school, this would be a good location for a school, or if this area is considered for long-term agriculture, this could be an option or consideration.
Okay, thank you. That answered my question.
Okay, we have a technical problem, apparently. The link to watch tonight's Plan Commission meeting is not working. I would like to turn to Kevin and find out what the projected time might be for getting that fixed, and whether we really should recess since this is supposed to be a public meeting. Kevin, Tim Parks, I see, has raised his hand. Tim, do you want to comment?
Yeah, we're pulling our hair out behind the scenes, Kevin and I. And to clarify, the meeting is available on YouTube right now, and the audio is available to dial in on Zoom using the phone number and the meeting ID on the agenda, but the meeting is not available right now on the media site link on the city's website. So we're 2 out of 3 in terms of availability of the meeting. Just wanted to make that, get that out there. So
the difficulty is some people might not be aware of those other 2 options. They might be only familiar with the most commonly used options. So I still have concerns about continuing until we get that up and working again. Do we have any projection on timing for that? Jesse?
Not at this moment. Yeah, we're looking into it. We're trying to find a solution as soon as possible. That's the only update that I have.
Chair, if I could suggest maybe a 5 or a 10-minute recess, and we could see where things are at that point. I think that might be our best course of action.
Okay, let's go for a 10-minute recess without objection from commissioners. Okay, that is what we will do, recessed for 10 minutes. See you in 10 minutes.
Test, test, 1, 2, 3, 4. Test, test, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay, our 10 minutes is up. I will call the meeting to order again. We do have quorum, and fortunately, it looks like everything is working again. So before we go back to questions of staff on the neighborhood development plan, I had meant to welcome our two new, well, one's not so new, plan commissioner members. Chris McCahill, he has a background in transportation and has served on transportation commission here for the city of Madison. So welcome, Chris. We're glad to have you on board. And then we are welcoming back former Alder Patrick Heck and now Commissioner Heck. So thank you for signing up again, Commissioner Heck, to be with us. So thank you. With that, we will go back to questions of Urvashi Martin. Are there further questions? Commissioner Solheim.
Thank you. I just wanted to go back to the potential school site since we received a comment on that. Can you clarify, do we typically label potential school sites even if the school district is a non-Madison school district? Does that make a difference at all, or is it about the same process?
Yeah, it's typically the same process as when we do our neighborhood development plans. We reach out to the school district and ask them what their needs are for future school sites, and depending on the whichever school district it is and what their needs are, we kind of reflect that in the plan.
Okay. And I guess I'm wondering if staff has ever considered any language. I think I'm recalling a while ago on a different plan, we had a concerned property owner, because I think maybe part of their land was a potential future park or something similar. And, I was kind of wondering if, as you mentioned, as was outlined in the staff report, it is a suggested location and would be subject to future negotiation, but would we consider adding any language to address that, just to make it more clear for any the current owner or future property owners that this site was selected due to, it's suggested due to its location, but it's not concrete. That has to be ironed out in the future.
Yeah, we can definitely add some language to clarify that.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful. We've talked in other circumstances before about, encouraging people to check out their neighborhood plans before they look at a property or even be aware of it. Provide some comfort to the property. That's all I have. Thank you.
Good suggestion. Thank you, Commissioner. Are there any other questions, comments, input? Commissioner Solheim.
Sorry, I had one more. As I was reviewing this and actually related to a later item, I was wondering if you could remind me for the differences in housing mix categories. So in the comp plan, we have like low residential, low medium residential. And in the neighborhood plans, it's housing mix 1, housing mix 2, although the colors are very similar, the same in the map. So I was wondering why the difference in terminology between the neighborhood plan and the comp plan.
Yeah, so in the neighborhood development plans, we try to add a little more detail than the land use categories in the comprehensive plan. The way they kind of translate from the comp plan land use categories with the housing mix types that we show in the neighborhood development plan. So housing mix 1 is the low residential category in the comp plan. The housing mix 2 falls as the low medium residential, the LMR category. The housing mix 3 and 4 that we show in the neighborhood development plans, they show as medium residential in the comp plan. And then housing mix 5 and 6, those show as the high residential category in the comp plan.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Alder Field.
Thank you. Yeah, I wanted to chime in and first thank staff for all of their work on this. I watched the recording of the Transportation Commission meeting from last week where this item was discussed, and in particular, some points about, as described by staff, the location of higher density housing compared to a future transit route. And I think an additional component of that was the kind of phasing of development with quite a bit of density prior to the availability of service by Madison Metro. Some of the concerns about the intersection and strain on the intersection, as I recall, were from concerns about the lack of bus before there is sufficient demand for transit out there, despite the gradual development of some bigger housing options. So I wanted to note for myself that there's at least a way for folks to get up to that park and ride, which staff helpfully pointed out is not too far north of the neighborhood in Sun Prairie and served by multiple bus options. So I do see in the attached maps on page 9 in the link on the Reiner Neighborhood Development Plan city webpage that there are multiple shared use paths that do lead directly from these areas of higher density housing out of the neighborhood and up to that park and ride. So I want to make sure there are ways that people can get to a bus without a car, and that I am satisfied with that. So just chiming in. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Alderfield. Commissioner Heck.
Thank you. Just a quick follow-up question that's not specific to this plan, but it's related to what Commissioner Solheim was asking about. Urvashi, do you think that the new I forget the technical term, I'll call them regional neighborhood plans, whatever they're called, the 12 planning districts, are those going to use the same land use categories as a neighborhood development plan like this, or will they be closer to the comprehensive plan? Do you have any idea?
Yeah. So I think that we haven't kind of figured out that aspect yet. But as I mentioned, that the housing mixes that are shown in the neighborhood development plan, they translate to the comp plan land use categories. I think the intent with showing the housing mixes in the neighborhood development plan is kind of showing a little more color and more details in the plan, but typically either way, if the land use categories of the comp plan are used or the categories of the neighborhood development plan, they kind of translate and connect with each other.
Okay, so we'll have to see, I guess, as these new larger area plans come to fruition, how those pan out. Thank you.
Yeah, I think we were kind of leaning towards the comp plan categories, since these area plans will be used to update our generalized future land use map for the comp plan. So I think we're kind of leaning towards the comp plan land use categories.
Thank you.
Commissioner McCahill.
Thank you. As a new commission member, I mainly am interested in hearing what everyone else has to say, but I did want to jump in on the recommendations from the Transportation Commission. As a member of that commission, Alderfield already spoke to this a little bit, but I thought it might be useful just to give folks a little more insight. One of the issues that came up that was pretty clear in the report is that the dense development doesn't seem to be tightly aligned along where the future transit lines are. And I think staff spoke to that it's, within a half mile, which is pretty close. I think a lot of us wanted to see more intentional integration. I realize given the sort of the difficulties with the topography and stuff, that becomes a challenge. But I think one of the other things that came up there that has always been heavy on my mind when I see these plans like this is having gone through the bus network redesign recently, and just sort of weighing the trade-offs of where we can run transit and at what cost, knowing that, we're always under constraints for how much funding we have for transit and everything. Seeing, compact development in very outlying areas like this sort of brings back flashbacks of making those trade-offs between where we can run transit. And the consultant in involved in the transit network redesign, made a comment about trying not to chase new development with transit. So that's just one of the pieces of the puzzle that I think was a lot of the Transportation Commissioner's mind when we were looking at this. So just wanted to sort of bring that insight and yeah, leave it at that.
Thank you, Commissioner, for adding that perspective. I don't see any further raised hands, so I would be looking for a motion. Commissioner Solheim.
I will move that the Plan Commission forwards the Reiner Neighborhood Development Plan to the Council with a recommendation of approval.
Is there a second? Seconded by Alder Field. Would you like to speak to your motion, Commissioner Solheim?
No, although actually I'll add I don't know if this has to be incorporated as a friendly amendment, to consider some additional language related to the potential school site, and the, any future considerations for that, if folks are on board with
so that was intended to be part of your motion?
Yes, sorry.
Okay.
I should have said that right.
Okay, thank you. Anything else that you wish to speak to, Commissioner?
No, thank you.
No. Okay. Any input, comments, discussion from other commissioners? Seeing no raised hands, we'll come to a vote, and I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hands, the motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Urvashi, for the plan and the report.
Thank you.
Next are the public hearings. Agenda item 3, Legistar 77013, located at 610 Junction Road, 9th Alder District. Consideration of an alteration to an approved plan development district specific implementation plan and approval of a conditional use for a restaurant nightclub to allow a restaurant nightclub tenant in a mixed use building. Kevin, I believe you'll be giving us an overview on that.
Yes, thanks, Chair. I will provide just a quick overview before we turn to the public hearing. This item, as the Chair had mentioned, there are 2 requests before the Plan Commission. The first is to amend the zoning text. This is a plan development zone property, and plan development zoning is site-specific and has its own list of allowed uses. And while restaurant nightclubs are allowed as conditional uses in the other conventional mixed-use zoning districts, it is not currently allowed within this PD for this site. The second then request before the Plan Commission will be the conditional use. It is requested as a conditional use, and so that is subject to the conditional use standards for the use itself. Just a little bit of background on the site itself. The site dates back to 2008. There's actually 2 buildings on the subject property. The current building, or the subject building, is a 2-story building. I believe this is the southernmost tenant site of that building. It's 2 stories. Back in 2022, there was an approved amendment to allow up to 17 dwelling units on the second floor of this building. At this time, staff understands that there's been building permits pulled to start with 7 buildings. So it is a mixed-use building, both having ground floor commercial and some ground floor commercial and residential in this building. On the same site, there's a 5-story mixed-use building to the south. There's other mixed-use buildings to the south, and then the Attic Angels apartment complex is to the west of the site. Now, just evaluating this, there are several comments and conditions. Based on the level of detail of the materials that was submitted, staff have provided several recommended conditions of approval if the Plan Commission can find the standards are met. These relate to the operation of the site, requesting quite a bit of information at sign-off. I did want to note that as of this morning, there is an additional comment, and this is at the recommendation of the West Police Captain regarding a management plan. And so those conditions are all noted in the materials that were located on Legistar and in advance. So, in conclusion, staff believes that the development, the conditional use for a restaurant nightclub could be found met, but do want to make sure that it's managed well. And so we've recommended several conditions of approval that staff believe are necessary to address the management. At this point, they're recommended as conditions of approval. If any of that information that the Plan Commission would find helpful to see in advance of making that decision, Plan Commission would have the option, as opposed to making a condition of approval, referring it and specifying what items that they'd want to see before they consider this again. Staff would be available for questions after the public hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. And let me see, I think we do. Does Emin Boshauskavili wish to speak? I have in support, but not wishing to speak.
And I believe he is the applicant.
Okay.
Good
Okay,
afternoon.
Emin, you are on and you do have 3 minutes. Please
Good
go ahead.
afternoon. Good afternoon. Hear me, and this Emin Bojanashvili and my wife Irene Gelfand. And can you hear Irene Gelfand more explanation for you guys? She better speak English better than me.
Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
So we have a plan for the meeting. So first one,
I'm sorry, but you're breaking up. It's really very difficult to hear you.
can you hear me now?
Yes. And your name is?
Irene Gelfand. I'm Emin Bojanashvili's wife, and I'm also owner of Caspian Grill.
Okay, go ahead.
So during the event, which is we have a family dining restaurant, and type of event can be a birthday celebration, baby shower, all these family events. We have our staff wearing the uniform, which is you can recognize who is working, who is our staff. We'll also have a security by front door who is checking the ID and just check what is going on. We have only front door open, so no one can walk in using, for example, other door or exit. And this is for security reasons. For the music, we are working right now with our landlord to put double installation on our ceiling. They start already, but we're in the process to put more. So I don't know if you have some other questions.
Okay, thank you. Are there questions of our registrants? Seeing no raised hands, Alder Conklin, did you have questions of our registrants?
Thank you. I kind of did. I had questions for them and for the commission as a whole. So I don't know if you want me to start with them or with you.
We are in questions of registrants right now. So please go ahead, Alder Conklin.
Okay, thank you. I guess my main question is how I can get a hold of them and connect with them, because that's part the problem is I have not yet been able to meet with them. We were supposed to have a meet and greet and I have not been able to. So I'm trying to see when is best for me to reach them and get in contact with them.
You can call us direct restaurant number. It's 608-827-8500. 827-8500. And we can schedule meeting. Yes, definitely.
Okay, very good. Thank you. That's all the questions I have for them right now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Shepard.
Yeah, I would just like to ask the applicants if they have seen the recommendation from the Madison Police Department and the conditions that were recommended, if they have seen those.
We had some, January 3rd, we had already meeting with city police department. Yeah,
Okay,
they're aware about using it. Yeah, aware and approved.
Okay, but did you see the actual recommendation that was part of our, once again, record that dated today, June 12th? Have you seen that actual written recommendation from the police department?
Yes, we did see, and let me just a second. I will open again. We're gonna follow what's recommended, and I think just a second.
Okay. I have no additional questions. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, we're gonna follow.
Again, you're very difficult to hear. So if you can get closer to your microphone or something, because
Can you hear me now?
yes, keep it like that so we can
Okay.
hear and understand you, please.
I'm sorry about that. Yes, we see the email, and definitely we have a plan. The plan every time when we have any type of event, we have a plan for security reason, for the behavior. It's why we have a security by the front door. And again, what I mentioned, we have our employee wear the special uniform. So if it's something happens, the customer know who they need to contact right away.
Okay. Any further questions of our registrant? Any further questions? Seeing Alder Conklin?
Yes, thank you so much. Is this where I can address the commission now?
You can, if you could you wait until after we close the public hearing and then you can do that. Seeing no raised hands for questions of our registrant, I will close the public hearing and we can hear from Alder Conklin. Please go ahead, Alder.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Plan Commission. I just really wanted to say and advocate that this perhaps be re-referred as far as granting the conditional use for the nightclub. I say that for one, because like I said, I have tried to meet with the owners before they even opened the restaurant, and I had went to the restaurant. We had set up a meeting time. I waited for 15 minutes. Nobody ever showed up. I called them when I left and I was like, hey, sorry, I missed you. I would like to reschedule, and I have never heard from them since. So I would like some time to be able to meet with them and just, see what their plan is, how we can work together to possibly make this happen and make everyone happy in the community. Number two, you guys have seen the comments that were registered in Legistar, but when I saw those, I had made a meeting to meet with Dragonfly Hot Yoga Studio, the business owners there, and as you guys seen, there is some concerns of things that are already happening, and there's not a nightclub there right now. And another concern I have is that 610 Junction Road is zoned for outside patio use, and 610 Junction Road can have outdoor seating. And when I was there on last Thursday, they do have outdoor seating out there already. But the problem is they have not followed the process and applied for the application to actually use the outdoor seating. So there's things like that are, they're not even following the process right now. And I want to make sure that there's a clear understanding of what the process should be and how we're going to go about that. So for those reasons there, I am asking that we please re-refer this so I can have some time to meet with them, and maybe, we can bring this back at a different time for approval. But at this point, I really ask the commission to not approve this at this time until we're all able to get on the same page.
And
So-
Alder, did you have a date to which you were hoping the Plan Commission would refer this?
Yes, I was hoping to the July 10th meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, a 30-day re-referral, please.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Alder.
Thank you.
Are there questions of staff? Alder Field.
Yes, a question for staff. Thank you. Staff, I'm wondering whether there are concerns on your end about the possibility of referring this to the July 10th meeting, if you'd see any consequences to that.
From staff standpoint, no. Procedurally, staff doesn't have a concern with a 30-day referral.
Thank you, Alder. Are there further questions of staff? Commissioner Heck.
Thank you. A question for Kevin, I guess. If we had an option in that late arriving staff addendum to require a management plan that would be approved by the police district, and that the final approval of the conditional use would be contingent on that. Would it be a problem to actually, since we're talking about a referral, to ask that be approved in advance of July 10th? Or do you think that's the same thing essentially? I'm kind of looking at it as forcing the some of the things that need to be addressed apparently to the forefront as quickly as possible.
Sure. I think the Plan Commission, I could see two options. One would be two variations on that comment. One would be for them to work through and get a plan that would be approved by the police. Second would be that they would bring that plan back to the Plan Commission, and then you would see that before you acted on it on July 10th. So I think either one is procedurally okay.
But how about both?
Well, I think that there might be a little, we'd have to clarify this. There sounds like there might be a little bit of conflict in terms of having, I suppose, yes, no, okay. I guess perhaps not. I think I understand. I think just be clear in the motion that the intent is before July 10th, that there's a plan that's been presented to police. I guess the question would be is if in the case that perhaps police, still have concerns about the draft plan, and it might be able to be conditionally approved. So okay. I might suggest a condition that the applicant prepares a plan, meets with PD, and then it can be up to the Plan Commission if there's still an unresolved issue back in a month from now.
Those will be in our materials for the July 10th meeting. So right. It's the same. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Shepard.
Hi, a quick question for Kevin. Could you just briefly comment on this particular situation of having the police department actually involved in this process? I want to make sure that it's clear that, again, we aren't doing anything unusual here, that this is part of the usual process. Thank you.
Yes, and all applications, development applications that you see do get routed to the police department. There were some communication issues during the COVID. We've now met with police and talked about ways to move forward and to improve the communications, but all applications are intended to be reviewed by police. In this case, because police were referenced in the comments, planning staff did reach out to the police department on this one to see if there were comments related to that in the comment. And so in this point, I think they're essentially kind of building off of the master plan that planning staff had already asked for. And then while planning staff's condition primarily was focused on noise, they also asked that the management plan speak to security related issues as well. But as far as normal, in the normal course of business, all applications are provided for PC comment and review. I'm sorry, police department comment and review. You're the PC.
Thank you. Commissioner Heck.
Thank you, Kevin. It appears that ALRC has already granted the restaurant nightclub license, but they're subject to the conditional use approval of Plan Commission. Is that correct?
There are two approvals that would be needed. There is the entertainment license, and that what was recommended for approval by the ALRC and approved by the Common Council back in January. At that time, there weren't any conditions of approval stipulated as part of that review back in January. So that's, I would say, that's part of the approval, but the conditional use is also part of the approval. Now, in this case, we are recommending some conditions of approval that weren't part of the ALRC. If those would become conditions, if those are found necessary to meet the Plan Commission's purview, which is the conditional use standards. Now, since there aren't any conditions, don't have to worry about necessarily conflicts between the two. That would be something staff would be advised. At this point, these would be the only operating conditions, but they would be Plan Commission conditions and not part of the entertainment license.
Okay, thank you.
Alder Conklin.
Thank you. I just wanted to add in one more thing too, because I did read the staff report and I do agree with the plan and most of the stuff that they have in there. I agree with everything, especially the hours of operation, only going until 10 p.m. during the week and then 12 o'clock on the weekend. So I ultimately agree with everything that the staff report has reported back on and the plans and how they want to go forward. I just think that we need to slow this down a little bit and make sure that we all can connect and be on the same page.
Thank you, Alder.
Yes, thank you.
Are there any further questions of staff? Seeing none, I'm looking for a motion. Alder Figueroa Cole.
So I'll motion for the item to come back to the Plan Commission on July 10th, I think it was. And July 10th, as requested by the Alder, and to contain the information from that the police department was asking for the security plan.
Okay, is there a second? Seconded by Alder Duncan. Alder Figueroa Cole, did you wish to speak to your motion?
I mean, sure. I read the emails, connected with the Alder, and based on the recommendations from staff, as the Alder indicated, I don't see much issue here, except that there is a willingness to have communications with all the parties involved in that particular location, and give them time to resolve those issues. I find them appropriate at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments, input? Seeing no raised hands, we'll come to a vote, and I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hands, the motion passes unanimously. Then moving on, 4 and 5, we're on the consent agenda. Then items 6 and 7 are related, and we will consider these as one public hearing. Following the public hearing, the Plan Commission will make separate findings and motions on each agenda item. Agenda item 6, Legistar 75151, creating sections of the Madison General Ordinances to assign permanent zoning of property located at 3440 High Point Road, 20th Alder District to Suburban Residential Varied 2 District. And agenda item 7, Legistar 77589, located at 1115 South High Point Road, 20th Alder District, consideration of a conditional use in the proposed Suburban Residential Varied District for dwelling units in a mixed-use building. Consideration of a conditional use in the SRV2 district for a daycare center. Consideration of a conditional use in that same district for a building or structure exceeding 10,000 square feet in floor area. and consideration of a conditional use in that same district for outdoor recreation to allow construction of an addition to an existing adult family home to create a mixed-use building that will add 19 apartments and a daycare center to the existing home and accessory outdoor pool. First, we will hear from staff, Tim Parks. Tim.
Thank you, Chair, members of the Plan Commission. The two items before you pertain to a 5.4 acre parcel located currently at 1115 South High Point Road, previously 3440 High Point Road. When the property was in the town of Middleton, the address changed to the current 1115 South High Point address following the attachment of the property on March 13th of this year, based on an application that was filed by Hope in a Future 3 LLC, Incorporated, on December 8th of 2022. The petition for attachment from the town of Middleton included a request for permanent SRV2 zoning. The city's cooperative plan with the town allows for a petitioner to request either temporary or permanent zoning. And so the Hope in a Future petition included a request for permanent SRV2. As noted in the staff report, however, while the attachment petition went forward in March, the rezoning aspect has been in referral and is back with a conditional use request that was filed on May 1st, following the attachment of the property, seeking approvals to construct an addition to an existing two-story adult family home that was in existence when the property was attached into the city 3 months ago. The addition proposes 19 dwelling units, 7 one-bedroom apartments and 12 two-bedroom apartments, underground parking, a daycare center for up to 23 children and 12 adults, which would be in addition to the intergenerational community that has existed on the site for approximately a decade. The subject site is recommended in the comprehensive plan for low residential and in the 2017 High Point Raymond Neighborhood Development Plan for residential housing mix 1, which are typically low density residential zoning classification or development classifications, not zoning classifications, my apologies, that would typically call for smaller building forms, lower density forms of development. However, in this case, staff believes that there is potential for the Plan Commission to find the request for SRV2 zoning to be consistent with the housing mix 1 and low residential recommendations, given that the proposed density of development following the addition in the 19 dwelling units would be well within the density range recommended in both housing mix 1 in the neighborhood development plan and low residential in the comprehensive plan, despite being in a building form that is not customarily prevalent in either of those use categories. We also feel that there is some argument to be made for the intergenerational adult family home being established on the site, which the addition would be a continuation of. You'll hear more from the project team about that during the public hearing in a few moments. Staff likewise believes that the Plan Commission can find that the conditional use standards are met for the mixed use building, the building over 10,000 square feet, which is applicable in any zoning, residential zoning classification. Any building over 10,000 square feet of floor area requires a conditional use approval. That would be applicable here. Also, the daycare center, which is a conditional use in all residential zoning districts. And finally, the existing pool, which is on the site now, but would require an outdoor recreation conditional use approval if it were established anew. And on the subject of establishing it new on the site, staff has concluded that it's possible for the Plan Commission to find the applicable standards met, and the project generally consistent with the plan recommendations because the existing adult family home exists on the site and because of the relatively low density proposed. Again, no major or non-standard comments from agencies that would suggest that the conditional use standards cannot be met. And I would be happy to answer questions following the public hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. We do have several registrants. I'll open the public hearing. The first registrant is Kevin Burrow, Greenway Boulevard, Middleton, in support, wishing to speak, representing Kanothi Bruce Architects. Kevin, you have 3 minutes.
Good evening. Thank you very much. This is Kevin Burrow with Kanothi Bruce Architects. Thank you very much for that summary, Tim. As you see on the plan in front of you, the property we're looking at was originally part of the town of Middleton. It was actually an island of the township, but has since been brought into the city of Madison. So it's right along South High Point Road there. If you go to the next slide, please. This property has been maintained as an adult family home, and what we are proposing to do is, in addition, to provide the additional 19 units of apartment living, along with a daycare center for children, an adult daycare center, and an activity area for all residents to be able to use. So as part of our layout here, we have located this to the east of the existing adult family home, and we'll be reworking the driveway entrance in and the parking area, and then providing underground parking. One of the key features on the site is that existing outdoor pool, which we want to preserve, as this serves as a therapy pool for the senior residents that do live here. And trying to maintain the existing gardens and other portions of the property. This has been located to the east, which still locates it over 115 feet away from any neighbor further to the east and about 60 feet south of any neighbor to the north. And we are just a two-story addition with this proposed development. If you go to the next slide, please. The overall layout is shown here, all 3 floors. We have underground parking for the residents that live here and potentially used for staff. And then we also have common area amenities in the basement. And then the main first floor connection, which connects to the existing adult family home, will have a community gathering space and the 2 daycare centers, both child and adult daycare. And then the upper story of that contains some amenities for after-school activities and office space. And then the balance of the project further to the east is all the 19 units, 15 of which will be used for seniors and 4 of which will be used for families. If you go to the next slide, please. Here's the overall layout, or the character of the building, I should say. This has been designed to be a simply 2-story addition to be truly in context with the character of this neighborhood and in scale and proportion to the existing home. So you can see the drop-off area here as it connects to the existing adult family home. You go to the next slide, please. Here's another view. Basically, as you drive in, you can see how this blends in to the roof lines of the existing property. Next slide, please. Here's a close-up view of the main entry and the drop-off feature. Next slide, please. You can see the outdoor activity area for the daycare center shown right in front here. Next slide, please. Here's a back view, which would be facing to the east. Again, all in scale and character, and each apartment does have their own balcony. Next slide, please. Here's, you can see the context as it surrounds the existing outdoor pool amenity, again, used as a therapy pool. Next slide, please. Here's another view looking how it ties into the existing adult family home on the right. And next slide, please. Here's the overall layout then in true scale and character as to how this blends in with the existing property here and is located to the east. If it would be located to the west, it would be downhill and substantially a challenge for accessibility to the addition.
Thank you, Kevin. That does conclude your available time.
Thank you.
The next registrant is Karen Kraus, South High Point Road, Madison, in support, wishing to speak, representing Hope in a Future on South High Point Road. Karen, you have 3 minutes.
I am Karen Kraus, founder and executive director of Hope in a Future. For the past 20 plus years, we've worked with the community, UW, and governing representatives to create a new kind of neighborhood. Next slide. Our inclusive and vibrant model. Next slide, please. Our inclusive and vibrant model empowers older adults and families with the opportunity to help each other flourish. Our first of its kind neighborhood model has received national attention and offers Madison and the UW a unique opportunity to become leaders in intergenerational work. The sustainable and replicable model offers 55 plus living with a new kind of cost-effective continuum of care, and it incorporates workforce housing and affordable daycare for young and old. These are services needed in our community and around the country. Next slide. The ideas for our model came out of my life and professional experience. I started life in a small town in Wisconsin where neighbors looked out for each other. When I was 8 and my father suddenly died, I benefited from our neighborhood safety net. A neighborhood grandmother, who is someone who everyone calls grandma, although no one is related to her, made sure that I never went home to an empty house. And the result was that despite the upheaval in our family, I continued to flourish. We later moved away and I became a latchkey kid where loneliness and anxiety were painful results and my school functioning suffered. In time, my life improved. However, when I was a teenager, my former neighborhood grandmother was placed in long-term care. There I questioned how we care for frail elders. She was referred to as 22, her room number, and ignored when she spoke. She had become invisible. This remains a reality for many people in large understaffed long-term care facilities. I wanted to do something about this, so I became a nurse, thinking that if I better understood people's needs, I would be in a better place to consider options. As a nursing supervisor, I often worked with single parents unable to afford childcare. One night, I learned that a staff member had 3 children in a running car in the parking lot, 2 so young they were in diapers. And after work, I sat thinking and praying about the frightened children, stressed mother, and the many seniors who endured endless empty hours asking me why I thought they were still alive, and wasn't there anything they could do to help someone. I knew firsthand that young and old could help each other. Suddenly, I imagined my former neighborhood upgraded to include simple services for children and frail seniors, along with a system of organizing helpful neighbors. Next slide. This is what we are working to create at Hope in a Future. Our first phase has included the intergenerational adult family home that opened 10 years ago, and we've received Best of Madison Award in 2018 and are nominated annually. Hundreds of volunteers and visitors come each year. Our expansion will complete our model. Plans include mission-driven architecture that allows for accessibility to indoor and outdoor spaces. Our programs are open to the surrounding community, and thank you for welcoming us to Madison.
Thank you, Karen. Our next registrant is Paula Reif, Sunnyvale Lane, Madison, support wishing to speak, representing Hope in a Future. Paula, you have 3 minutes.
Hi, I'm Paula Reif, co-founder and vice president of the board at Hope in a Future. Thank you for considering this type of a new neighborhood for Madison. Intergenerational connections and mutual support are the mission and vision of Hope in a Future. In a May 3rd, 2023 report, the U.S. Surgeon General, Dr. Murthy, highlighted the devastating impact of loneliness and social isolation. Referring to the public health crisis, Murthy presented a framework for a national strategy to advance social connection, detailing recommendations for increased connection. Quoting Dr. Murthy, "Our relationships are a source of healing and well-being hiding in plain sight, one that can help us live healthier, more fulfilled, and more productive lives." Relationships and social connections are key factors to addressing the loneliness epidemic that we face. For the past 20 years, Hope in a Future has created a solution to address these deep loneliness and disconnect. In our first phase, we developed an award-winning adult family home where we involve multiple generations in the care of adults in their last stage of life. We use a family of friends staffing model. Staff, children, and residents share meals and life around a family table. Visitors, regular volunteers, and loved ones become our extended family of friends. No one feels invisible, and caring relationships help young and old flourish. In an effort to facilitate those connections with community members, we've extended invitations for people in the neighborhood to join us in our community events since we purchased the property in November of 2012. From our first holiday party in December of 2012 to invitations to our porch concert that was held June 6th of 2023, we've made every effort to immerse ourselves as a resource for the surrounding neighbors and provide a framework for intergenerational neighbor-to-neighbor connections. Before the pandemic, some neighbors regularly attended our monthly potluck and house concerts, as well as intergenerational activities and volunteer events. These neighbors are happy to see us move forward with our expansion plans. We've offered opportunities throughout the years for our neighbors to learn about our expansion plans, attempting to share information on open house opportunities through Nextdoor, neighborhood association website contacts, and going door to door with flyers to inform those neighboring our property about our expansion plans. Our website has reflected our intent to complete the therapeutic interactive intergenerational neighborhood model, we call it a TIN, since 2012. We appreciate our neighbors who see Hope in a Future as a resource. We've been made aware that one family chose to move into High Point Estates over another location because they saw being near Hope in a Future as value added to their neighborhood life. Engaged neighbors create safer communities. We hope to be a part of the solution for our neighbors and the greater Madison community. Thank you.
Thank you, Paula. And just to remind registrants, we do take questions after all the registrants have spoken. The next registrant is Lynn Payton, Meadow Sweet Drive, Madison, opposed and wishing to speak. Lynn, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Yes, I'm Lynn Payton, and I live on Meadow Sweet, 2 houses east of the property in question. And my remarks today also represent the feelings of my husband, Robert Payton, who could not join me. Yes, we believe that the ideas behind Hope in a Future and the therapeutic integrative intergenerational neighborhood are wonderful in theory, but do not work well on this property or within the vision of the city and its plans, the comprehensive plan and the High Point neighborhood, Raymond Road neighborhood plan. The impacts that we're concerned about include potential future development with the changing to the SRV2 zoning should Hope in a Future ever relocate or the project not happen. This rezoning would potentially allow units as many as 145 units on this property, which is a significant difference to the average density of the current HM1 zoning with 6 per acre or 33 homes. We're very concerned about traffic along South High Point Road with no requirements in place from the city about adjusting for traffic patterns with the increased use in and out of the facility. This is in an area where South High Point Road reduces to a single lane for just a half a mile before becoming 2 lanes again. And at Velvet Leaf Drive, there already had been created a passing lane because of multiple accidents in the area. And we can't help but worry that additional traffic in and out of the facility would create similar traffic hazards, along with this potential extension of Meadow Sweet Drive, having 3 left turns in this single lane stretch of South High Point Road. We have other concerns that I'm sure my neighbors can speak more to in terms of noise, traffic, light, and just impact on the more to privacy on the closest adjacent neighbors. We also want to address the continuation of Meadow Sweet Drive, which seems ill-conceived with the current plan. If this was continuing into or being developed into another neighborhood, continuing Meadow Sweet Drive would make perfect sense to connect those two. But when we're talking about this single large building and this stretch of road potentially going through their property into Valley Ridge, it seems an unnecessary risk for both the residents of Hope in a Future and Meadow Sweet Drive. And then lastly, we would like to consider that the reasons behind giving exceptions to the plans, the city plans for this project being the low density and that the current use, that negates the fact of how large this building is, that how many the additional uses of the daycare and the impacts that will have on traffic in and around the property. So we would hope that you would consider the impacts that the neighbors are bringing. And we do believe that this is a wonderful vision to have. We just question whether this is the appropriate location, and perhaps the location that's already zoned appropriately would be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. Our next registrant is David Struntz, Welton Drive, Madison, opposed, wishing to speak. David, you have 3 minutes.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I'm quite puzzled as to why we're even talking about this. It seems to be contrary to the comprehensive plan, the neighborhood development plan, and all of the surrounding zoning of the single family housing. It's interesting to hear how Hope in a Future mentions how, and their architect mentioned how well it blends into the area, because we all have single family houses and they're nowhere near as big as that one. I was also quite surprised that the planning staff seemed to feel like this was a good idea. It's not for anybody of the residents that are here. And I'm not exactly sure how it could be considered part of the plan that they have for this area. We had 4 meetings with Hope in a Future. At the beginning, we thought, okay, well, they're way out of the zoning area here, but maybe they'll be willing to negotiate some terms to make it more acceptable to the community, because quite honestly, they keep talking about their neighborhood, but it's actually our neighborhood. We're the ones that bought the houses here, and will have the damage of them coming in with the big piece of big building. So I'm a little concerned about how this blending can be considered when they have 19 a building with 19 units in it, and we all have individual houses. So there's no blending. I'm not sure why we have the even have to consider this. We have proposed in these 4 meetings things that might make it easier, moving some of the building away from the edges of the property, but they've refused to do that. We suggested additional trees all around, evergreen trees all around, and fencing all around, and they've also refused to commit to that. They've said, we'll take everything under consideration. So we attended 4 meetings and got 0 from Hope in a Future. So I'm thinking they're probably not that interested in seeing blending into the current neighborhood. They want to construct their own neighborhood. So I would, at the very, very least, request the Plan Commission, who is our only chance of keeping the value of our properties all surrounding here. I would ask that they, at the very, very least, require them to put new evergreen trees and fencing all around the area. I would like for them to make them move the facility.
That concludes your available time. Our next registrant is Kyle Judd, Meadow Sweet Drive, Madison, opposed and wishing to speak. Kyle, you have 3 minutes.
Yes, hello, thank you. My family and I purchased our home directly east of Hope in a Future with the intention of raising our family in a quiet, family-friendly, dead-end street. We searched and saved for a long time to achieve this goal and made a significant investment paying a premium for these type of features and privacy. If Hope in a Future's plans are approved, the way we see it, this would dramatically affect the desirability and reduce the value of our home significantly. Moreover, this would impact our daily lives by increased noise, traffic, decreased privacy. As Kevin stated before, there's balconies on each of the property units facing our property, compared to what we currently enjoy, which is really nice, and we want to keep that and preserve that as much as possible. We feel that this expansion should be considered from the perspective of the surrounding properties, as Dave said, that have already been here for a long time, and the rest of the community, and how that would affect the neighborhood plan, or how it would fit in, rather, or not. Adding such a large addition, including services like child and adult daycare and recreation center and all of those things, just does not fit the character of our neighborhood at all. I'm told that they were claiming that they have these events with well over 200 people throughout the year already. that increased noise due to the expansion would be just excessive in our opinion. Nobody wants to live next to that, quite frankly. This is not what our small neighborhood wants or needs. And until now, we've just simply tolerated that along with other things because we do stand for what Hope in the Future stands for and their mission. We just don't want it to be as large of an expansion as they're proposing. As others have said, we did have 4 other meetings with them. They verbally agreed to various concessions that we've requested of them to try and meet in the middle and be friendly neighbors. None of those concessions that we've asked for are presented to you today in the May 1st application that was submitted. None of them. We've tried to reason with them and be reasonable with our concessions, and unfortunately, they've all been ignored so far. Many of our neighbors were not able to join this meeting today. However, I and the rest of the neighbors would like to formally request that this application is rejected and denied so that they can go back to the drawing board and hopefully help make significant changes to meet the requests of the rest of the neighborhood that we believe would be a lot better outcome and a win-win for everybody, because we do want to help get them to that their desired goal and mission. And I would just echo what Lynn and Dave have said so far as well.
Thank you, Kyle. Our next registrant is Amy Harriman, Main Street, Madison, in support, wishing to speak, representing Hope in a Future. Amy, you have 3 minutes.
Hello, my name is Amy Harriman, and I'm a real estate attorney with Quarles and Brady, and a member of the development team with Hope in a Future. As both Kevin and Karin and Paula had identified, that Hope in a Future has been working on this project for many years. We originally began working with the town of Middleton in 2021 and are now working with the city of Madison and have been doing so since the fall of 2022. We originally sought a concurrent attachment and zoning, as Tim Parks had identified and described in the staff report. We agreed to separate the two and continue with the zoning and the conditional uses separate from the attachment at the request of the neighbors. We have met with them on 4 occasions over the last 5 months. At those meetings, we've discussed the project and ways that Hope in the Future could add elements to it to make them more comfortable, including screening or fencing and plantings to shield neighbors. Hope in the Future has agreed to add a fence nearest to the neighbors who are most impacted by the project and add additional plantings to add vegetative screenings, which I believe is also evidenced in the project plans that are included with Legistar 77589. I'd like to call everyone's attention to pages 21 and 22, for example, that describe some of the plants that Hope in the Future plans to include. The neighbors in our meetings, we had discussed additional or separate designs, and unfortunately, all of these were significantly cost prohibitive and costing several $1 million more than the current project. We believe that this current plan is the most appropriate for Hope in the Future and the parcel. We believe that this works within the comprehensive plan and the neighborhood plan. The neighborhood plan recommends an HM1 zoning, which allows 6 units per acre with a maximum of 16 units per acre. Hope in the Future, as Tim Parks described, maintains a 5.4 acre parcel. Therefore, this is significantly less than the density that's suggested in both the comprehensive plan and the neighborhood plan. We believe that the proposed addition will also fit within the design, since it's including brick and composite shake and lap siding. It is 2 stories high, similar to all the single family homes that are in the area. And therefore, we hope that the Plan Commission takes this into account as they deliberate on this today. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Amy. Our next registrant is Madeline Judd, Meadow Sweet Drive, Madison, opposed, wishing to speak. Madeline, you have 3 minutes.
Hello, my name's Madeline Judd. I'm one of the neighbors living on Meadow Sweet Drive. I just wanted to speak to the fact that the rezoning and the plan for expansion significantly impacts not only our property value in a negative way, but also the enjoyment of the property and neighborhood as a whole. As the mother of 2 young boys, the draw to this neighborhood was that it is a family neighborhood with plenty of green space, mature trees, privacy. I grew up in Madison in a neighborhood similar to this. It's what I wanted for my family, which is why we bought here. Currently, my family enjoys plenty of outdoor time. We see deer, rabbits, a variety of birds. There are nesting turkey vultures on our lot line, as well as hawks. We even have a woodchuck who lives here. I believe this is something worth protecting. The current expansion as it stands, instead of having the wonderful trees, we would have 19 units with patios looking directly into my yard. And as we spoke about the SRV2 zoning, this is not just a 10,000 square feet addition. In their estimation, it's actually closer to 44,000 square feet. I, along with my neighbors, came to the table many times to work collaboratively with Hope in a Future, who frankly made empty promises time and again. I'm also concerned about an extension of Meadowsweet Drive, and I feel that we should not be granting additional zoning when the fine-tooth details of this plan haven't yet been presented. I would also like to address our Alder Barbara McKinney, who hours ago resigned from Hope in a Future's board of directors, stating that it had become a distraction from her work as alderperson for our district. I would like the assurance that she will remain a non-voting member on this or any future decisions as it relates to this matter. This is not an attack on Barbara or her character. I just want to make sure this is fair. We've really been navigating this complex, confusing process on our own. Going forward, I might suggest we gain representation for a stand-in alderperson just on this matter alone to help give us a voice. When I hear the Plan Commission talk about how it feels to me like this seems like it's an easy pass, but this is a big deal. And I think that the neighborhood should have a voice as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Madeline. Our next registrant is Diana Eisenberg, Main Street, Madison, opposed, wishing to speak, representing Kyle Judd. I think Kyle already spoke, so I think Kyle represented himself. But Diana, you have 3 minutes.
Yes, good evening. So I am representing Kyle Judd. I know he spoke previously. I would just like to echo his sentiments that this proposed development is not consistent with the comprehensive plan or the neighborhood development plan. The proposed expansion is much more extensive than would normally be permissive in these areas which are designated as residential housing, and we would propose that they extend this or look at perhaps going back to the drawing board. As Kyle mentioned, the neighborhood development is not consistent with their proposed uses, and it will be a significant detractor to the uses of their homes, reduce their value, reduce the use of their properties, and such an expansive plan without additional thought and consideration to the impact on the neighbors is not appropriate.
Thank you, Diana. Our next registrant is Ryan Reiter, Welton Drive, Madison, opposed, wishing to speak. Ryan, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. I live on Welton Drive. I built my home in 2011. So prior to Hope in the Future's purchase of the property, I do have several concerns I'd like to voice. Mainly is the layout of the proposed plan and the impact to surrounding neighbors like myself. As we saw from the drawings, the location of the development is not central. It is specifically on the very north end and on the east end, having high impact to the existing neighbors. That impact is significant in that the footprint of the physical structure is easily 5 times the size of anything in the neighborhoods or on the property itself today. And that's not just a large structure, but it's a structure that comes with a broad side of 150 continuous feet of development on the north and roughly 200 feet of a broad side of a building on the eastern side. These are significant impacts to the views that we have as neighbors and would be very different if there were 5 different independent standing structures with green space to be able to have around them. But it isn't. It's a large structure significantly located to the northeast of this side and very close to the properties on the north side. The other piece is that the tallest portion of the building is located next to these properties as well. And for these reasons, I think it is reasonable to require Hope in the Future to have further setback rules to offset some of the impact of having such a large scale structure like this so close to the adjoining properties. There have been others who stated this, but I think that requiring certain design features for the conditional use permit is reasonable. I believe a dedicated privacy fence around the entire property where the adjoining homes are is a reasonable ask. This would shield not only the views, but some of the light pollution that will come with the additional footprint of automobiles from the parking lot. It will also ensure that children, pets, and other animals stay on the property. In the 10 years I've lived here, that has not been the case with children, dogs, and chickens wandering around my property. So there is a history to which they have managed the property that could be addressed by these privacy fences in more than just a couple locations, but the entire development. Secondly, I'd like to see an increase in replacement of the evergreens around the entire border of the property. I have seen this decrease over the 10 years that they've been in the property. There have been fallen trees onto my property where I've had to address this directly with them. So they have not maintained or managed their facilities and their property well. So I do have concerns with this, and I believe requiring these design features for this conditional use permit is a reasonable expectation for it to be hard-coded in this use permit. And then lastly, like many others, is the traffic concern. The left turn on High Point going south is a blind left turn for those folks coming over the hill just past the Welton Drive. We've seen many accidents here. And so the entry point and expanding.
Thank you, Ryan. That concludes your available time. Our next registrant is Carrie Sanders, Chautauqua Trail, Madison, in support and wishing to speak. Carrie, you have 3 minutes.
Good evening, neighbors. My name is Carrie Sanders, and as mentioned, I live on Chautauqua Trail. I am speaking in support of this wonderful project. Karen Kraus and her team have been pursuing this work for more than 30 years. They have proven that this use is complementary and, in fact, enhances our beautiful High Point Estates neighborhood. The proposed project addresses 2 significant needs in Madison: housing and childcare. This property offers high-quality, beautifully designed space that graciously blends into the neighborhood. Hope in the Future maintains our current property very well and has designed the expansion to also be maintained very well. The research that Karen and her team have implemented over the better part of the past 30 years is cutting edge for our community, but is actually well substantiated across the nation. And part of the outcomes include, again, a more vibrant, more peaceful, more accessible housing and affordable childcare. They do not include statistics such as reduction of property values or increased traffic. The development group has investigated other designs, but as previously mentioned, those other designs are not financially feasible. So the proposed design from KBA Architects is optimal for the surrounding area and for Hope in the Future. And this proposal does fit within the comprehensive plan. As a neighbor to Hope in the Future, I firmly believe, and I have seen, that Hope in the Future will enrich our lives. It's really an honor to be a neighbor to Hope in the Future, which is a place full of love and care, and they are creating an intergenerational neighborhood. This intergenerational neighborhood is a family neighborhood, just like my neighborhood, a family neighborhood in High Point Estates. This proposed development is a practical, sustainable response to the much division and hurt that harms our neighborhood. Yes, even in High Point Estates. I urge you to join me in welcoming hope and a future to our neighborhood. God bless.
Thank you, Carrie. Our next registrant is Andy Floatmeyer, Apostle Island, Madison, Wisconsin, in support and wishing to speak. Andy, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Again, Andy Floatmeyer here. I've lived in High Point Estates for over 19 years, and we are very much in favor of the rezoning request. We have been very involved in this nonprofit since the beginning. We have volunteered numerous hours and have closely worked with Karen and her team. As mentioned before, it's a nonprofit that's accomplishing a mission that is vital to our community. Our city has a great need for care residents for our elderly and has other marginalized families. So Hope in the Future puts their ideas into practice, providing an excellent place for intergenerational care and growth. So we're very much in favor of it. I'm very close to them, and I just really appreciate considering our input. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next registrant is Simon Neville, Velvet Leaf Drive, Madison, in support and wishing to speak. Simon, you have 3 minutes.
Thanks. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. So look, guys, I'm a neighbor, right? I've lived on Velvet Leaf Drive here in Valley Ridge neighborhood for 20 years. And I became interested in Hope and a Future many years ago when I noticed there was a lemonade stand one Saturday morning with my kids. You know, the golden rule is you always stop at a lemonade stand. So we parked the car at home, quickly walked back there and tried to learn what was going on. And the more I learned, the more I realized that Hope and a Future provides a solution to a very major problem we have, which is the health and support of the young and old and within the same environment. And this is actually, right, the definition of a true community. And it's sadly, honestly, we all know it's very rare where we hardly know our neighbors anymore. And research actually has shown that intergenerational communities do have many benefits regarding issues of social isolation, loneliness, child development, daycare solution, which in turn provides employment solutions, self-esteem solutions based on feeling cared for and valued, and so on. So, you know, that's I'll be brief here. That's a brief explanation of the reasons for my support around the what and the why of Hope and a Future. And simply, I understand what they are doing is beneficial to all of us. And quite honestly, it's about the greater good. I understand that if I was one of the folks talking tonight who was directly next to it, I get that. I understand their concerns, but I think that what I'm choosing to do, what we should do, is think of the greater good. And if I think about the physical and operational aspects of the planned expansion, then we all need to be pragmatic and realistic. And the fact is that space could very easily be sold to a profit-seeking developer in order to create many more buildings, which would be approved by the council as long as the building and usage codes were being followed. I just think that's a fairly safe assumption, whether anyone likes it or not. In other words, the planned Hope and a Future solution will likely result in far less physical buildings and people than if they are forced to sell the entire property and move the initiative elsewhere. So again, as a long-term resident of this neighborhood and the west side of Madison, I fully support this initiative and would be happy to take any questions. Thanks for listening to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. Our next registrant is Michael Ding, Welton Drive, Madison, opposed and wishing to speak. Michael, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. First, I want to say that, we all, I live on 7717 Welton Drive, and the parking lot for this expanded project is going to run up within probably around 10 feet of my property. And I do appreciate what they believe in and what they're trying to do. But I think what's at matter here is, how does this plan for development, how does it fit the current neighborhood? I bought this property in 2022. I'm a relatively new resident to the area. And the reason why, I bought a home in this neighborhood, was number one, the privacy, it's a big single family home neighborhood, very family friendly. My kids are right there, going to enjoy their time growing up. But, that's all going to really change a lot dramatically with these new development plans, the increased traffic, the reduced privacy, the increased noise, and all I'm asking for is for the Plan Commission to really consider, does this fit the neighborhood? They want to talk about the lack of density for this project, but, that's spread among, many different single family homes. I would like to see, if it was the same amount of density and it was, many single family homes with their own individual plots, it would be different than one giant apartment building structure, that has all the density kind of, within one building. And what I asked was that the Plan Commission just look at the overall neighborhood. And when I look at the drawings or, the illustrations with all the single family homes and then this new structure actually, it does look like, it looks like a hotel or a resort with a pool. It doesn't look like the rest of the neighborhood, which are, single family homes, detached single family homes. So I just request that, either deny or at least extend the time for which, this project gets approved so that the neighborhood and Hope in the Future can actually work something out. We've been at 4 meetings already, and they promise one thing or they'll come back with consideration, but I don't think they're really negotiating in good faith because they just keep saying no to everything, or they say that they may do something. For example, they said that they would put the fencing around the entire property, and now it's only for the parts that are bordering their extended parking lot, and that's because their parking lot is, about 10 feet away. They want to say that, my structure is 60 feet away from here, but really it runs right up to Welton Drive. Their property line where it meets mine is probably 10 feet at the closest. So
thank you, Michael. That concludes your available time. So Kevin, I just a comment, people registered multiple times. And so I tried to track it all. Did I miss anybody who registered to speak?
I'm looking at the registrants for 6 and 7, and I believe we've called everybody that's registered wishing to speak.
Okay, thank you. Then I'm going to read into the record those who registered not wishing to speak, but available to answer questions. And again, please forgive me if I repeat because there are repeats in the registrants. Virginia O'Brien, Prairie Drive, Westport in support, not wishing to speak, available to answer questions. Cammie Scott, Red Tail Pass, Middleton in support, not wishing to speak, but available to answer questions. Jesse Detmer, opposed on Welton Drive, Madison, opposed, not wishing to speak, but available to answer questions. Okay, I think that got all of the ones that are available to answer questions. Kevin, do you see anybody I missed?
And you had Kevin Hayden in that list?
I'm sorry?
Kevin Hayden in opposition, wishing to available
to answer
questions.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, good. Are there any questions of any of our registrants? Commissioner Heck.
Thank you. I'm not sure if this is for which member of the development team this is for, but maybe Karen. I'm just interested in knowing about just a little more information about their special events that they have or are planned to have. I've seen figures and heard from neighbors that 200 to 300 people come to these events. Could they just describe perhaps what those are all about and how parking works and when there are that many people, if that is true?
Karen, is that something you can answer, please?
Yes, it is. We're over the course of a year, we may have 200 to 300. We've had, before the pandemic, we had a monthly potluck and house concert. We did once have a Christmas concert that we had well over 100 people show up. But as a rule, those are 30 to 50 people that come to those. And then we've had volunteer days. There were a couple of volunteer days when we first bought the property where we did have close to 200 people show up. We had just a huge amount of work to do on the property when we first moved in. But as you know, as a rule, we're talking about 20 people, 30 people, something like that at each event.
Thanks. And then is there a indoor facility that holds hundreds of people at one time? There was mention of this too. I didn't see that in the plan.
Right. In the expansion that we're planning, there is a kind of multi-purpose room on the main floor that would handle more people. And of the couple of events where we had large numbers of volunteers coming, we're planning for larger numbers. Those times we had a bus go back and forth to parking that we had elsewhere. I can't remember what we call it now. It's an apartment building now. But one time Princeton Club let us use their parking and we had a shuttle go back and forth. That was for a big work day. And then one time we did that with the apartments that are at the Catholic Center there that I forget what they're called now. But
okay.
We did that. But it's not normal to have 200 to 300 people there at a time. So.
Okay. Thank you. That's what I was looking for.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Commissioner Heck. Commissioner Solheim.
Thank you. I just wanted to verify there's been discussion about fencing and landscaping. And I guess this would be for Kevin or anyone on the development team. If you could just confirm if you would be open to the addition of solid fencing along that parking lot and drive to provide screening from headlights and similar uses.
Yes, this is Kevin Burrow. Thank you very much for that question. Yes, that has been a subject that's been brought up at several of the neighborhood meetings, and we are in agreement to commit to providing a solid fence along that northern portion that is directly affected by the driveway and the parking lot area. The ramp that goes to the underground parking slopes down immediately, and there is no concern of any headlights in that direction. So any headlights would be pointing to the west as they exit and or to the north if they were to park. So that's the area that we had talked about doing additional fencing. And we have enhanced the landscaping plan since the initial discussion with the neighbors to provide more dense screening along the entire northern portion of the parking lot as well.
Okay. Thank you, Kevin. That's all I have.
Thank you, Commissioner Solheim. Commissioner Shepard.
I guess this would be for the development team. I just wanted to know if you've had, we received a communication or letter from Alder Harrington McKinney. And in that communication, she noted her limited ability to communicate because, once again, she's new to the district, but to communicate with individuals about this development. Just to ask the development team, have you been in contact with the Alder recently? And if so, have there been any anything positive or any once again, what was the nature of that communication? Did anything come out of that in terms of how to move forward?
Mm-hmm. This is Karen. I guess I could speak to that. Alder McKinney has been on our board of directors until actually today. We were in the town of Middleton for a long time, but she always, told the city that she was on our board, as just to make that known. But she did decide to step down because of neighbor discomfort with her being on our board. So she's very, she's obviously she was on the board because she supported the project. So I don't know if that answered, but she does like the project.
Well, I'm asking now that she's older, has there been any official communication? That's what I'm getting at here.
Oh, she attended the meetings that we had with the neighbors, and I'm not sure. Do you need more than that?
No, you're just saying once she was sworn in as alder, she's attended meetings. That's what you're saying.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Anything else? Okay, I guess not. Commissioner McCahill.
Thanks. I have a question for the development team. It looks like there's a staff recommendation to reserve a space for the extension of Meadow Sweet Drive as the neighborhood plan and the comp plan calls for. But from everything I can tell, there's a lot of grading around what looks to be a play area. So I was wondering what the current thinking is about the extension of Meadow Sweet Drive.
Yes, this is Kevin Burrow with Canothy and Bruce. We are in agreement that we can provide the reservation. We will coordinate with the city in regards to the most appropriate location for that, and are also willing to guarantee that we will not place any structures within that area. No permanent structures, that is. So we will have to coordinate with traffic engineering in regards to the layout of this extension, but we should be able to come up with a solution extending Meadow Sweet from east to west across the property and avoid any of the proposed structures that we have shown now.
Okay, thanks.
There wasn't going to be a.
Thank you, Commissioner. Are there any further questions of any of the registrants? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. Are there questions of staff? Commissioner Heck.
Thank you. This is probably for Kevin. Kevin, I if I'm looking at the ordinance correctly, if this project, let's say, did not go through, or they decided to move somewhere else after we'd rezoned it to SRV2. From what I see, for a multi-unit multi-dwelling unit building, a conditional use permit would be required if it had more than 24 units. So if I'm reading that correctly, they would, any future development that was larger than 24 units would need to be at Plan Commission for a conditional use permit, right?
As you ask that question, I'm double checking that number to make sure it's 24.
Okay.
Bear with me 1 second. I can confirm that. That's your only question right now. I can confirm that offline, or not offline, but in a moment here.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Did you have any further questions, Commissioner Heck?
Not at this point. Thanks.
And okay. Alder Heck, Commissioner Heck, I can say that yes, your read is correct. It is permitted use up to 24 units, and conditional use is allowed above 24 units, 25 and above.
Okay, and then just one quick follow-up. Then we heard from one neighbor saying that as many as 145 units could fit onto this property, and certainly that would require coming to Plan Commission. But I assume that numbers like that are highly variable and difficult to predict based on exactly what's proposed. I see that, how many floors, all the setback, usable open space, et cetera. I assume that if Plan Commission were so inclined, you probably could get quite a few units on there, but not without coming to Plan Commission.
And I'll certainly let if Tim Parks had any follow-ups. There are, there are a few different metrics that would set the maximum cap. I think the most significant is probably the lot area requirement that requires 1,500 square foot of lot area per dwelling unit. But you're also open space and other considerations would come into play as well.
Okay. That pretty much answers my question. There's a lot that would go into figuring out what the maximum number of units could be should Plan Commission be so inclined. Thanks.
Are there further questions of staff? Seeing no raised hands, I'm looking for a motion. Commissioner Solheim.
Yes, I'll move that the Plan Commission forward zoning map amendment to assign the SRV2 zoning to 1115 South High Point Road to the Common Council with a recommendation of approval.
Is there a seconded by Alder Figueroa Cole? Commissioner Solheim, did you wish to speak to your motion?
Yes, just briefly, I'll speak on this one. I think I just want to go over a couple of things I noted in the comp plan, since there was a lot of discussion about the comprehensive plan and neighborhood plan. And what we are looking at is consistency with the comp plan. So not contradicting the goals, objectives, and policies in the comp plan. So one section I looked at was the low residential section of the plan, which is what this area was set for. And it says low residential areas should provide a range of housing choices for households with varying incomes, sizes, ages, and lifestyles. New developing low residential areas should include at least 2 different residential building forms and include both owner and renter occupied housing. And then I also looked at the statement of purpose for the SRV district, which was in our staff report. To stabilize and protect the essential characteristics of residential areas of varying densities and housing types, typically located in the outlying parts of the city, and to promote and encourage a suitable environment for family life while accommodating a full range of life cycle housing. So, to boil that down, I think the building form is a little different than what we would see in some of these areas, but it's still 2 stories. It's still a townhouse style. The density is consistent with the area. It's even much lower than the maximum density thresholds for this area. And, it's on a major street. It's across the street from areas that are settled for higher density in our comprehensive plan. And it's an expansion of an existing use. It's providing services and housing that our community needs. So for all of those reasons, I am providing this motion of support.
Thank you. Any other comments or input? Seeing no raised hands, we will come to a vote, and I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hands, the motion passes unanimously. Next, we have agenda item 7, Legistar 77589, in regard to the conditional uses, and I am looking for a motion on that. Commissioner Solheim.
I'll move that the Plan Commission find the standards for conditional use are met to approve construction of an addition to an existing adult family home containing 19 apartments, a daycare center, and accessory outdoor recreation, subject to the conditions in the staff report and the additional condition to incorporate fencing along the north side of the site along the parking area.
Seconded by Alder Field. Commissioner Solheim, did you wish to speak to your motion? No.
Not this time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any input, comments? Seeing no raised hands, we'll come to a vote, and I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hands, the motion passes unanimously. Next on our agenda are 4 items which are related, agenda items 8, 9, 10, and 11, and they will be considered as one public hearing. Following the public hearing, the Plan Commission will make separate findings and motions on each agenda item. Agenda item 8, Legistar 76899, located at 437 through 445 West Johnson Street, 430 to 440 West Dayton Street, and 215 to 221 North Bassett Street, 4th Alder District. Consideration of a demolition permit to demolish 10 residential buildings for a proposed residential redevelopment. Agenda item 9, Legistar 77208, substitute, creating sections of the Madison General Ordinances to change the zoning of property at those same locations. Also, 4th Aldermanic District from planned development to downtown residential 2 district to urban mixed use district. Agenda item 10, Legistar 76900 at the same locations. Consideration of a conditional use in the proposed urban mixed use district for a multifamily dwelling with greater than 8 dwelling units. Consideration of a conditional use in the UMX district for a new building greater than 20,000 square feet and more than 4 stories, and consideration of a conditional use in the UMX district for outdoor recreation to allow construction of a 12-story apartment building with 232 units. Agenda item 11, Legistar 76903, approving a certified survey map for a property owned by Core Madison Bassett LLC, located at the same location as previously indicated in the 4th Alder District. First, we will hear from Kevin Furco about the proposal. Kevin.
Thank you, Chair. Members of the Plan Commission, just to give an update, this was last before this body on May 8th. Since that time, it's been at the Common Council, who referred it to this evening's Plan Commission meeting. And before it returned to you, the item received a recommendation of final approval from the Urban Design Commission, and their recommended conditions of approval are included in your materials. And ultimately, it would be your up to the Plan Commission to recommend and forward on or adopt those as for approval as they relate to the conditional use. As the chair had mentioned, we have four requests before you. All in all, this is to build a 6 to 12-story apartment building with 232 units of housing. I won't go through it if there's any questions about the various approvals, but we do have 4, the demolition permit. We have a zoning map amendment to bring the entire project site under UMX zoning. The city would want to see consistent zoning underneath the project, and some of the sites, while it's primarily UMX, there are a few sites, as noted, that are not zoned UMX. Several conditional uses are required, as the chair had mentioned, and then also a certified survey map to combine the underlying lots. Since this proposal was last at the Plan Commission, several changes have been made, some at the Plan Commission's request, others at Urban Design Commission's request, and others at staff's request. I'll do a quick summary of the requests as staff understands them. Among the changes, the new common building entrance was added on Dayton Street. There was the removal of the side and rear exterior townhouse entrances. There was revisions to the vehicle entryway on Dayton Street, a revised lighting plan. The submittal now includes EV facility details. The 12th story has been reduced to comply with zoning, so it doesn't include other facilities up there that we're going to count against the height and story map. There is additional information on mechanical screening, and there is now the inclusion of a mural are among the key changes that are in this packet. So with that, staff believes the standards can be met and would recommend approval, but staff was also available to answer questions after the public hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. And we do have registrants. I will open the public hearing. We have 3 registrants representing the developer, and they wish to pool their time. So 9 minutes total. The registrants are Brian Munson, East Lakeside Street, Madison, Trina Sandschafer, Williamson Street, Madison, and Doug Tekenor, Milwaukee Street, Chicago, all in support. Brian, we will start with you.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Chair. Brian Munson, principal with Vanderwall and Associates. Glad to be back in front of the commission with an exciting project within the downtown area, focused on creating some new opportunities for student housing in support of the campus. I think Kevin did a great job with an overview, so we can kind of jump to slide 3 and talk through a little bit more information about what we've been up to since we were in front of the commission. Since we were last year in front of the commission, we worked to address city staff comments, as evident by the recommendation for approval. We've addressed UDC's comments, culminating in a recommendation for final approval on May 31st, and met several times with the steering committee in support of their additional outreach to the neighborhood. Next slide, please. The resulting changes to the project include the changes requested by UDC, as Kevin noted, removal of the townhome, exterior doors to the townhomes, creation of a secondary Dayton Street entrance, and adding an exterior garage door while reducing the overall door height for the entrance, the vehicle entrance on Dayton Street. It also incorporated the changes requested by staff, again, focused on the townhome orientation while keeping the street facing townhomes, introduction of a mural to help address and create opportunities for architectural detailing on that side of the building, detailing the mechanical screening, then finally revisions that were incorporated per your request, which was to add the details about the EV charging, EV ready stalls, and detailing the 12th floor mechanical elevator overruns, as well as the mural and townhome details. This project also incorporates neighborhood feedback whenever possible through sustainability initiatives that include the goal of LEED Silver design, renewable energy mechanisms on the roof, in this case, likely solar, and incorporation of the public art with the mural, which will work with the neighborhood to implement. Next slide, please. While we recognize that not all elements of the feedback can be incorporated into the market rate project, we're excited to bring forward a project that implements the adopted plans, reflects the zoning code requirements, and adds much needed new housing in support of the downtown student population. We've appreciated the opportunity for a productive dialogue with staff, the commissions, and the neighborhood throughout the course of this project. And tonight we're here to ask for your approval to move the project forward towards implementation. Since you have had a lengthy meeting already with several more items after us, we will, in the interest of time, we have the entire design team here available to answer any questions that you may have, as well as detailed plans outlining all of the changes that have been integrated into the packet. But with that, I will cede the balance of the time and be available to answer questions if there are any. Thank you.
So did either Trina or Doug wish to speak?
No, in the interest of time, we'll be available for questions.
Okay, very good. Then the last registrant is Austin Scott Pignota, Lakeshore Drive, Chicago, in support, not wishing to speak, but available to answer questions. Are there questions of any of our registrants? Questions of any of our registrants? Commissioner Heck.
Thank you. I'll ask this of Brian or any of the other members of the development team. I as you've heard and as we've read in the report from the Campus Area Neighborhood Association Steering Committee, they continue to have concerns about affordability, and apologies if this was discussed previously at another Plan Commission meeting, but since I'm a newbie, I didn't participate in that. I know that Core Spaces has been able to do some accommodations for some units to be more affordable for students that have higher need. Can you discuss why that's not possible in this proposal, apparently?
Sure. Actually, I would defer to Doug Tishner with the with the development team to answer that question.
Thank you for the question. Yeah, we did have a number of productive meetings with the neighborhood. In effect, this is to just point back to what Brian had led off with. We are adhering to the underlying code to develop a by right development with a variety of unit type options at a variety of price points. In that instance, our goal is to develop a by right deal. By right meaning adhering to the underlying code, and in addition to that, increase supply, specifically in this acute location, but also in broader Madison. So I think, while it's market rate, we are increasing supply, which will have an impact on this market in a more broad condition.
Thanks. I understand what you're saying, but by my count, there are approximately 60 units of naturally occurring affordable housing that are going to be potentially demolished for this proposal, and that's a serious problem for the student market. But apparently not for the portion of the student market that you're reaching for. I understand that we can't require affordability, but I will just close and say I certainly wish you would have considered some way to accommodate at least some of the same demographic that's being displaced by this proposed development.
Thank you, Commissioner Heck. Alder Govindarajan, and I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that correctly. Alder?
You're good. Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. My name is MGR Govindarajan. I'm the District 8 Alder. I'm very new, and I am in the process of understanding how Planning Commission works, so forgive me if I am not completely accurate here. But to add on to what Commissioner Heck said, the Campus Area Neighborhood Association did put out like a survey of students, and we had almost 80 students respond. And might I remind you, this is summertime. This does not happen very often with 80 students responding. Almost every single comment was about that this is going to be way too expensive. Students need more housing. Yes, Madison in general needs a lot more housing, but we really need to focus on the right type of housing. And for the downtown area, it really has to do affordable housing. And I understand Planning Commission is limited in how you can view that scope, but I encourage you to consider it as much as possible within your capacity. Many students who will be living here, who are losing the naturally occurring housing, are not in favor of a market rate apartment complex being built. And I will say that as the vast majority of students. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Alder. Commissioner Shepard.
I just want to give credit where credit is due. I think the team did a very good job in terms of putting together a very comprehensive management plan. I'm sure there are always things that could be, once again, highlighted or done better, but the plan that you put together is very detailed, and that's something that's very welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Shepard. Are there further questions? I have a question. Are these units proposed to be furnished? And if not, is there a delivery bay or bays for when students move in?
Yeah, I'll take that. This is Doug again from the development team. The answer is yes. There's both of those things. The units will be furnished, and in addition to that, there is a delivery bay that's on Dayton Street. In that instance, it would be behind the garage door, which is a recent addition per the last Urban Design Commission meeting that we had on May 31st. It will likely be a fast-moving garage door. So on those move-in days, that door would likely stay open the whole time, but there's not much by way of outside of clothing or other personal items that would be going up into those rooms because they're furnished.
Okay, very good. Thank you. And one other question. Are you putting in any more than the minimally required EV charging stations or EV ready parking spots?
Right now, we have what's required by code. However, each parking stall within the building will be will have the capability to turn over to EV in the instance that we decide to add more or if code expands in the future.
So you have some kind of electrical conduit that is
cast in the concrete.
Okay.
Yep, that's correct. So
okay.
They're EV ready.
Okay, great. Thank you. Any other questions for our registrants? If not, I will close the public hearing. Are there questions of staff? Commissioner Solheim.
Thank you. Quick question for Kevin. The mural that was added in that goes back to UDC, is there a process that UDC approves murals, or is it kind of similar to the sign process? I'm kind of curious how that works.
It would be different from the sign process. Essentially, what the Plan Commission in this case would be creating a special condition of approval that those details would need to come back. Just wanted to be clear that it would be treated separately from sign regulations and so forth if it indeed was a mural. But it's going there I by way of that was their advisory recommendation. So it would be the condition of the Plan Commission that detail would still need UDC approval prior to permitting.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Any further questions of staff? I don't see any further questions of staff. Alder Revere, did you wish to speak?
Yes, thank you so much, Chair Zellers. I want to wish all the commissioners, obviously, a good evening and a special welcome to Commissioner McCahill and a hearty welcome back to Commissioner Heck. This is obviously a very substantial proposal that's before you. I want to thank those that served on the commission last month for the re-referral. As you heard from the applicant, frankly, through their consultant, Brian Munson, but also moreover, as you hopefully all had the chance to read the latest updated report from the Campus Area Neighborhood Association, I believe it was time well spent for the re-referral. As you heard also from Alder MGR, there were approximately 100 residents of that block in the surrounding neighborhood that took advantage of an online community survey and completed that survey. It particularly wish to take my hat off to the many Campus Area Neighborhood Association activists that went door to door encouraging that activity. I think it was above and beyond the call. And I really appreciate all the good work that they did. And you see that in their written report. Unfortunately, no one from CANA was able to join us in person this evening at the public hearing, obviously. Obviously, this proposal has a lot to like to it. I'll just state the obvious that you all well know, and that is that we need more housing in our community. We especially need more housing adjacent to campus, with the UW-Madison enrollment at approximately 50,000 students now, and obviously increased substantially over the last few years with record-breaking freshman classes. There's no denying that we need additional housing that's geared toward the student community. And there's a lot to like, as I say, in this proposal that I could articulate in more detail. It goes without saying further, though, that we have a severe affordable housing crisis that includes UW-Madison students. And it is most unfortunate, and I appreciate, and couldn't have said it better myself, what Commissioner Heck and Alder MGR stated already during the public hearing about affordability. As is always the case, in the first conversation I have with proposed downtown developers, I bring up affordability, and Cora is well versed in the conversation and what's going on in our community, given their past developments. Obviously, a major one under construction today with the so-called Olive project on the 300 block of State Street. And I had certainly hoped from the beginning that Cora would have agreed to at least that level of affordability and the arrangement that a lot of work went into with the UW Office of Student Financial Aid in this particular application. Obviously, you heard from the applicant tonight that isn't the case, that from the beginning they geared this as a market rate project, in large part because the zoning code allows them to meet their pro forma with a 12-story maximum height on West Johnson Street, 6 stories on West Dayton Street, and building to the zoning as proposed in the rezoning that's before you this evening, making all of these many parcels urban mixed use zoning, met every aspect of what they were looking for. I very much look forward, on the other hand, to working with Cora on their next and even more major proposal directly across West Johnson Street from this subject site. And that is for a proposal that will be the very first, I believe, to take advantage of the ordinance that among others, Commissioner Heck worked on in this meeting to increase affordability in the core downtown area by allowing the additional height within the code if certain requirements are met that require affordability. Cora has been working with city staff on how that newly created ordinance will work with their proposal that's again geared toward immediately across West Johnson Street between West Gorham, West Johnson, North Broome and North Bassett Streets, and have every expectation as of tonight to believe that there will be a substantial affordability piece in that proposal moving forward, which would allow them generally for 4-story heights along Gorham and Johnson and 7 stories along North Broome Street. And so I really hope that will work out. And obviously there's a myriad of issues still to come on that proposal, which, by the way, is scheduled for a second informational presentation before the Urban Design Commission coming up on June 28th. The issue of affordability, notwithstanding, certainly being the number one concern that we heard throughout the neighborhood conversations, I also want to certainly mention another issue that came up with your question, Chair Zellers, relating to sustainability and EV. Those of you that I hope all of you have had a chance to read the written material, the input from the Campus Area Neighborhood Association, you probably caught on perhaps pretty quickly, given the level of specific recommendations, that there's a subject matter expert or two amongst the CANA Neighborhood Steering Committee membership, and appreciate that the applicants have been ready, willing, and interested in hearing all the sustainability ideas put forward at the neighborhood meetings that we've had. And I hope that they will go above and beyond what has been proposed in this application, as they did with the Olive proposal through a minor alteration process, adding solar to that building that's under construction again in the 300 block of State Street. I hope that we will see moving forward additional sustainability measures, and I have every expectation we will, as this proposal is not scheduled for construction until the summer of next year, 2024, which means that there won't be occupancy until the summer of 2026. So notwithstanding, the tremendous need for additional student housing adjacent to campus today, these over 700 new units that are proposed in this application will not be online, by the way, until the summer of 26, if approved and built. The main area that I do want to take perhaps a little more of my time with is the issue of the townhomes. With good reason, both the original staff report, largely written by Chris Wells, and the addendum before you to the staff report speaks to that aspect of this. Frankly, I have a bit of a difference of opinion on city staff on how the original townhomes would have worked. I totally, though, appreciate that city staff from the get-go have had concerns about security, mainly regarding the initial layout of the townhomes being largely internal entrances, much like some of us that are familiar with the former Grimm Bookbindery housing development on the 400 block of West Gilman Street. And I think that this applicant, who's promised to hold and own and operate this, if approved and built, for the long term, unlike the Hub and the James, where they sold those pretty much after opening, could have made this work quite well. But I absolutely acknowledge that with the unknown future development of the Lexington apartments at West Dayton and North Bassett Streets, which were attempted to be included in this project, but the developer was not interested. The owner of the Lexington was not interested in selling at this time. That it made for perhaps an unknown future of how this would hold long term with who knows what built on the corner of Dayton and Bassett long term. But in a perfect world, I do wish that we could have had these internal separate entrances for townhomes included in this for the reasons stated in the Campus Area Neighborhood Association's report to the commission this evening. The Urban Design Commission, I think, did Yo Person's work, as they always do, in trying to work with the applicant to address both the security concerns, but also then the design considerations. And although I would have preferred that the entrances to the townhomes were on the outside for all of the townhomes, not just the two which currently face West Dayton Street that are retained in this plan. That is just something I wanted to perhaps get off my chest and explain that it was a disappointment for neighborhood stakeholders and myself that we couldn't make that work. Some of you, especially Commissioner Heck, will remember that we had a somewhat, although not exact, analogy with the student housing project that's under construction a stone's throw from here, kitty corner, called the Verve at Bassett and West Johnson, where there were concerns about separate townhome entrances there, but they weren't internal; they were exterior. So this is kind of is not the first time we've dealt with this in the immediate neighborhood. Lastly, I want to point out and welcome the addition of the mural to the project. Another kind of glaring concern with this from the get-go was a large blank wall adjacent to the Lexington apartments, and have every hope and confidence that the applicant, if this is approved and moves forward, which I suspect it will work with the community on an appropriate mural that will then be embraced ultimately when this would need approval from UDC at that point, and hope that they'll work with the local art community to create a mural that's very much appropriate for the neighborhood and can address that large blank wall. I also hope that when this is ultimately built, that they have appropriate landscaping to also assist us in screening that large blank wall there. So on a whole, I absolutely support the application before you. Each of the various agenda items, believe that each of the various statutory conditions can be met, and concur with the staff opinion subject to the staff comments and conditions that you approve each of these items with the, as already stated, concern about the loss of the many dozens, about 60 units of naturally occurring affordable housing, including Alderfield's former home. So I certainly can't say that doesn't weigh on me. That unlike the Corps' last proposal, it's under construction now. We're not one single solitary unit of naturally occurring affordable housing was lost in that proposal. We are losing a lot here, and that needs to be acknowledged and memorialized, if you will. So thank you very much, Chair Zellers. As always, would be happy to answer any questions if there are any from the commission.
Thank you, Alder Verveer. Are there any questions for staff or Alder Verveer? Seeing no raised hands, I'm looking for a motion. Commissioner Solheim.
I will move that the Plan Commission find that the standards for demolition permits are met and approve the demolition of the 10 residential buildings.
Is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Shepard. Did you wish to speak to your motion, Commissioner Solheim?
Sure, I'll speak on this one. We have a couple to go. I just wanted to add that I think that a lot has been spoken about this proposal already. I'll just add that I found the CANA Steering Committee report at this point, at this meeting and the prior meeting, to be so impressive. And I want to say thank you for all of your work and time to put that together. And clearly there are some very knowledgeable and invested folks on that committee. And I hope we can maybe get you on some future city committees or something. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other comments from commissioners on this motion? Then we will come to a vote, and I'll assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hands, motion passes unanimously. Next is agenda item 9, Legistar 77208. Do I have a motion? Commissioner Solheim.
I'll move that the Plan Commission finds that the zoning map amendment standards are met, and for the zoning map amendment rezoning 437 to 445 West Johnson, 430 to 440 West Dayton, and 215 to 221 North Bassett Street from PD and DR2 to UMX to the council with a recommendation of approval.
Seconded by Alder Figueroa Cole. Did you wish to speak to your motion, Commissioner? Okay. Are there any comments, input before we come to a vote? Seeing no raised hands, we'll come to a vote, and I'll assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hands, motion passes unanimously. Next is agenda item 10, Legistar 76900. The conditional uses. Is there a motion? Commissioner Solheim.
I'll move that the Plan Commission find that the standards for conditional use are met and approve a request for a multifamily dwelling unit in the proposed UMX district to allow construction of a 12-story apartment building with 232 units.
Is there a second? Seconded by Alder Figueroa Cole. Did you wish to speak to your motion, Commissioner Solheim?
I should have added at the end of that, subject to the conditions in the staff report.
Okay, right. Good. Thank you. And did you wish to speak to your motion, Commissioner Solheim? No. Any comments, input before we come to a vote? Seeing no raised hands, we'll come to a vote, and I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hands, the motion passes unanimously. And finally, agenda item 11, Legistar 76903, certified survey map. Commissioner Solheim.
I'll move that the Plan Commission forwards the certified survey map to the council with a recommendation of approval.
Is there a second? Seconded by Alder Figueroa Cole. Did you wish to speak to your motion? Okay. Are there any comments, input before we come to a vote? Seeing no raised hands, we will come to a vote, and I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hands, the motion passes unanimously. Next on our agenda is subdivision regulation update. And I'm going to read through what is the introductory part of this. The discussion of the proposed amendments to the subdivision regulations on June 12th will include an overview of the update by staff, an opportunity for the Plan Commission to take public comment on the proposed ordinance revisions, and discussion of the ordinance by the Commission, including any additional information it needs before it can make its recommendation or our recommendation. Following the staff overview, the public comment period and discussion, the Plan Commission should continue, not close or recess the public hearing, and refer the ordinance to its June 26th meeting, at which time a recommendation by the Commission may be appropriate. The Board of Public Works is scheduled to review the ordinance on June 21st. The Common Council is tentatively scheduled to consider the ordinance on July 11th. The Transportation Commission reviewed the ordinance on June 7th, and their recommendation was available to us. They did recommend proceeding. So this is agenda item 12, Legistar 78130, repealing and recreating section 16.23 of the Madison General Ordinances to update land subdivision regulations. And Tim Parks will brief us on this. Tim.
Yes, thank you, Chair, members of the Plan Commission, and thank you for Chair Zeller's taking care of about 40% of my verbal report to the Commission. Just to provide the overview of what we're doing tonight, which is an important update to the city subdivision regulations, which have largely served the city since their original adoption in their current form since February of 1960. And as noted in the memo, there have been mostly minor updates to section 16.23 of MGO over those 60 plus years. But the proposal that's before the Plan Commission tonight for discussion is a somewhat more impactful update to that section of ordinance to make it a little more contemporary, to maybe refurbish it a bit, and bring it into the 21st century. The ordinance comes to us as a byproduct of the Common Council's adoption of the Complete Green Streets Policy and Guide on January 3rd of this year, following a lot of work by the Department of Transportation and City Engineering Division throughout 2022 back into 2021. We're pleased to have Tom Lynch from the Department of Transportation here tonight to answer questions and go into whatever level of detail the Plan Commission would like regarding Complete Green Streets. Tom really led that effort, and it was as part of the adoption of Complete Green Streets on January 3rd that we were able to kind of shake off a bit of the rust on a long established goal of ours dating back even before the 2018 comprehensive plan. I believe going back to planning division work plans from 2016 or 2017 to update the subdivision regulations. So it's kind of a culmination of two pretty important efforts. One that needed a shove and got it from Complete Green Streets. But we're basically with the ordinance that's before you tonight for discussion, trying to clear out some of the flotsam and jetsam that you see in the current ordinance with some outdated or not contemporary definitions, eliminating an entire plat approval alternative that has not been used in my nearly 20 years with the city and not recently even before that. And really trying to emphasize and make clear the importance of the city's adopted plans and the consideration of any subdivision or land division that comes through the approval process, noting that the Plan Commission always sees preliminary plats and final plats, and the Common Council sees sees all preliminary plats and final plats, and most certified survey maps for more minor divisions of land up to 4 lots. But the Plan Commission doesn't see all of the certified survey maps. And one of the things that the ordinance changes will do is better clarify the role, the timing of administrative reviews when those happen. And out of the roughly 50 to 60 CSMs that the city approves in a given year, roughly 3/4 of those, maybe even a bit more than 3/4, are administratively approved as allowed by the subdivision regulations, subject to a resolution of the Common Council to accept dedications or release dedications to the public as a result of that land division. So again, really trying to make contemporary what we've been doing for a number of years. With the approval of subdivisions and land divisions, and really, trying to emphasize plan consistency more, as I stated a couple of moments ago. A couple other things that we're doing since the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, all of the applications for subdivisions and land divisions have been submitted electronically. However, the language in 16.23 did not allow for that. It's been sort of an ad hoc process over these last 3 or so years. We are now fully electronic with our submittals, or almost entirely electronic with our submittals, and the changes in the code that's before you will, provide the language to make that possible. Going forward, we're also updating technical requirements for subdivision plats and certified survey maps, and also doing a few things that have been lagging behind in the current subdivision regulations compared to especially Plan Commission practices, and also what the zoning code did in terms of lot area and other dimensions about 10 years ago. With the current zoning code taking effect, we have a provision in the code right now that only allows 80-foot deep lots in the smaller traditional residential zoning classifications. That was a follow-up to language that under the old zoning code applied to the old R2Y, maybe R2T zoning classification, which the new zoning code, or current zoning code, because it's not that new anymore, actually, divided in a number of different ways, but the code only reflected one of those many districts. So we're actually going to make it so that in most of the traditional residential zoning districts, only an 80-foot lot depth is required as a minimum, compared to 100 feet in all of the other districts, including these suburban residential classifications. One of the other things that the proposed amendment will do is make it possible for the Plan Commission to condition tree preservation. That has historically been done on an ad hoc basis with not really strong language in the subdivision regulations pointing to the how that should be done, and even only making limited mention of the why tree preservation should be considered, but certainly not really providing a mechanism for how. So we have proposed language that will do that. We're also clarifying the use of building setback lines. Building setback lines are something that has been part of the Plan Commission's purview for review for decades. But the problem is we have building setback lines that are not clearly distinguished between those that have been imposed by the Plan Commission and those that were imposed by a subdivider. So we'll run into situations where we have building setback lines that were imposed on a subdivision plat 100 years ago, not by the city, but it comes up to question, is that a setback that the city is going to enforce or is it not? And some of the language that we're proposing is intended to make it very clear that when we impose a building setback line, how it will be enforced, and where it was not imposed by the Plan Commission and the city at large, that the city will not enforce it, to sort of hopefully clear that issue up in future years. And, not to bury the lead, one of the major changes to the subdivision regulations that the Plan Commission is currently discussing is the implementation within the subdivision regulations of the Complete Green Streets policy and guide, so that we can begin to turn how we dedicate and construct streets through the subdivision process towards the Complete Green Streets policy and guide that was adopted about 6 months ago, and away from what we have been doing for the most part since the adoption of the code in 1960, which established minimum street widths, minimum right-of-way widths for those streets, and really using this update to bring things around to what Complete Green Streets is looking for in terms of street cross sections and right-of-way as we go forward, dedicating new streets through the subdivision process, constructing those streets, and then also Complete Green Streets outside of this ordinance will also inform how the city reconstructs streets going forward. And I won't say much more on that last part because that's more for Tom Lynch and the folks that worked on Complete Green Streets to speak to. But just to kind of wrap up my overview tonight, we're bringing a mostly technical document before the Plan Commission in terms of updating the subdivision regulations to reflect current standards for approval, to better emphasize the implementation of our adopted plans, most importantly to bring Complete Green Streets into the subdivision regulations and make it so that we can have the electronic submittal process that we've had for the last 3 years going forward. I'm happy to stop there and answer questions. I know that we have one party that's wishing to address the Plan Commission, which was part of the reason for having the introductory discussion tonight, and then taking public feedback, getting any comments that the Plan Commission is prepared to offer tonight, and then coming back in 2 weeks to address any of those questions, provide additional information, hear from anybody else who wishes to address the Plan Commission, either in writing between now and then or at the June 26th meeting. We have noticed another public hearing for June 26th. So there will be opportunity for additional feedback to be provided by the public after tonight. But I'll stop there and answer questions after we hear from the public. Thank you.
Kevin, do we have any registrants wishing to speak?
Yes, we have one registrant. We have Bill Connors registered, wishing to speak neither in support nor opposition.
Okay. Bill, you're on and you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Bill Connors, Executive Director of Smart Growth Greater Madison. I'm still in the process of trying to gather any feedback we might have from members of my organization, but I'll pose a question to the body, and you can take it up with staff if you would like to or not like to. But one of the things I noticed in the proposed ordinance is that many references to CSMs are now sprinkled throughout this new subdivision ordinance, and the subdivision ordinance talks about noise from an airport being incompatible with housing development. Not long ago, a task force looked at whether airport noise should be a reason for prohibiting housing development, residential development near the airport, and concluded that there wasn't a good way and really wasn't a good reason to try to prohibit it. But now I'm concerned or questioning whether if somebody, say, along East Washington Avenue, the part of East Washington Avenue, needs to obtain approval of a certified survey map to combine, say, 3 parcels to create a development site, and that's relatively near the airport and has, under models, relatively high noise from the airport, is that CSM going to now be prohibited under this new ordinance? I think that would be unfortunate if it were, but maybe staff can talk to that. That's all the feedback I have at this time, but I may have more feedback the next time this comes to the Plan Commission.
Okay, thank you, Bill. Are there any questions for Bill? I don't see any. Tim, could you comment on Bill's questions in regard to the noise issue? We had a comment from the public that also raised airport noise.
Yeah, that's language that is largely in existence in the code now. And in terms of the question about combining existing parcels for the purposes of developing something along East Washington, per Mr. Connor's hypothetical, that wouldn't probably fall under the guidance to not create lots within an airport approach. I think that language really talks about the subdivision of land within an airport approach zone more so than the combination. It's also probably noteworthy that there would be a land use question that would go alongside at some point that lot combination question. So if you're going to take existing parcels, combine them for the purposes of land development, while I reserve the opportunity to, look into that further and maybe provide additional information in 2 weeks, my initial impression would be that would not apply. However, I can recall an instance where a party in the hypothetical area was proposing to take large parcels and further divide them to create additional housing. That might be a different outcome. The answer might be different, but in terms of combining existing parcels at this particular moment, no, I don't think that guidance and the criteria for approval would apply the same if we were talking about an actual division of land.
So I'm just going to, since we're on the subject of noise, and we did get the other comment that indicates about that we've got that the ordinance talks about mitigating adverse effect of noise from highways. Should there be, or did you look at anything addressing other kinds of noise other than from highways, like from the airport, or no?
No, not really. The genesis of the highway noise provisions that you see in the code are principally there now and are a byproduct of requirements that have been passed on to us for, I believe, at least 40 years to attenuate highway noise whenever we're going to allow development to occur next to a limited access state or federal highway, coming to us from language in state administrative code, both sections trans 233 and trans 405, which basically says that the state isn't going to be responsible for addressing noise that would impact residential and institutional land uses that would be allowed by subdivision, in particular next to those noise generating highways. So if we're going to, allow those uses, we have to require noise attenuation if there are impacts. And that's been something that's been in our code since, I believe, probably not quite 40 years now that I think about it, probably the late 1980s, and something that, we have very strict guidance that's passed on to us from the state in regards to that. We don't have such regulations, nor are we necessarily certain that we can create those regulations as it applies to airport noise. And I believe that this issue has come up recently, and Kevin Furco might recall it as well, where issues have come up about development near airport noise contours, both in terms of the Ramish subdivision, which I believe may have been outside of those noise contours or very close, but also the redevelopment of the Gardner Bakery site at East Washington and Stoughton Road, where there were concerns about that being more directly in either a 65 or 70 decibel noise contour, and whether or not we could condition approval of that development on them exceeding the building code for how to attenuate that noise. And I think we actually did that via carrot rather than stick in terms of using the Affordable Housing Fund program to work with the applicant to reduce the airport noise impacts on that project.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Shepherd.
Yeah, just a quick follow-up to that. Would that also apply all the standards you mentioned in terms of the airport and airport noise to passenger rail? If we get passenger rail through Madison, do those same standards apply? I'm just curious.
We have some language in the subdivision regulations now that apply to subdivisions adjacent to or near railroads, but that primarily deals with intersection distances, within a certain proximity of the railroad. We don't have language in the subdivision regulations now that deal with railroad related noises. And we have been cautioned that, much like the airport related noise, we may be limited as to what we can do with that noise generating source.
Thank you.
Other questions? Commissioner Heck.
Thank you. We've discussed one of the items that was brought up by a resident in an email to us, Linda Leonards, and a couple other things she brought up about, I think I'd call it musings on restrictive covenants. And because there was mention of restrictive covenants related to infrastructure in a subdivision process, I guess. And Linda asked many great questions, I think, about restrictive covenants. And I wondered if you had a reaction to her input on the physical aspect, because I think she was kind of going beyond what this particular change is about. But, should we be, I guess, promoting restrictive covenants in this particular sense, which is more about, I think, a road in a condominium complex or a subdivision or something that is a restrictive covenant?
Thanks. That's a really good question, and it's a fair point that was raised in Linda's comments to the Plan Commission. There have been the city has been involved in restrictive covenants and like documents for about 20 years since there were concerns raised about whether private subdivision components that were supposed to be maintained by homeowners associations would, basically continue to be maintained by those associations in perpetuity. And, question mark or quotation marks because, nothing is absolute. I mean, even the proposed language is as absolute as it can be about trying to encourage public infrastructure that the city can accept as part of the subdivision land division process and maintain in perpetuity versus things that are developed as part of a subdivision and whether they are maintained in perpetuity is left to the abilities of a subdivision and any association that might, provide governance over that subdivision to maintain landscape islands, to maintain rear yard buffer strips, private parks and parklets, and private roadways, because we have limitations on where the city can provide services. In terms of when somebody goes forward and dedicates a street to the public and the city engineer issues plans to that development to construct the public infrastructure as well as the private infrastructure that's going to serve it, we are inspecting those public improvements to make sure that they're installed according to the plans, according to the specifications that we have for myriad things. I mean, soil compaction, pipe diameters, the strength of concrete for curbs. I mean, it's extensive. And when we inspect that and we accept those as public, then we're accepting that they're built to our standards, that we'll be able to maintain them. There's a warranty period that follows the installation of those versus privately installed infrastructure, which may or may not be held to that same standard, and that the city can't, for example, provide refuse collection on, cannot provide snow removal services or pavement, and it becomes the obligation of that subdivision to provide those services in lieu of the city doing it, because typically those improvements are built to a standard beyond exactly what the city knows, so the city can't take them over. And so the point of those covenants that we have now is to basically say, let's at least make sure that when we're setting up these private improvements, that there's a minimum baseline, that there'll be funds generated by a homeowners association through annual fees or assessments that will keep enough funds on hand for all of the services that the subdivider has chosen to provide, instead of dedicating that infrastructure, streets in particular, to the city and allowing the city to maintain those. And there's other trade-offs that go into that too. We have some developments with private streets that, because the right-of-way doesn't have to be a minimum of X feet wide, and the pavement may not need to be as wide as it would be if it was a public street, that the layout of that development can be different, and therefore, perhaps more compact or laid out differently than it would be if they were on fee simple lots on public streets, for example. But there are trade-offs involved to that flexibility in design. We have a number of developments. I can think of at least a half dozen on the west side where a certain flexibility and even frankly to a degree exclusivity can be achieved through private streets and private subdivision infrastructure that would not be possible were it developed on public streets, et cetera. And so the covenants in place are really to say, all right, if you want it to be private, you got to maintain it as private, because when the pavement needs to be replaced, or the park needs upgrading, whatever the circumstances are, the city's not going to do it, because of the trade-off that was done when the subdivision occurred. So we're basically amplifying that now, making it clearer, throughout the code, to say that, our preference is public. If it's not going to be public and it's going to be private for whatever reasons, if it gets approved as private, that we want it to be very clear that these will be private improvements in perpetuity to the extent that that's possible, because the city will not assume that private infrastructure when it becomes convenient in the future for whomever developed it or whoever owns it at that point to say, well, gosh, all this pavement's going to cost us a fortune. We don't have an association that's capable of doing that. So we want the city to take it over. And the city's response is quite possibly going to be no. And that has come up in other instances. So we're just really trying to bring that to a light and maybe make it stronger language than the language we've been using for the last 20 years. What we are not doing with that provision, and I think that the public comments kind of go down that path, the city does not have a role in subdivision covenants that don't have that sort of shared infrastructure component. And I know that, we're probably many of us are aware of sort of the negative connotations of some of those private restrictions over, really anything probably going back to, before 1980, potentially having some radioactivity, and typically the older, the more radioactive some of those provisions were in terms of exclusive or exclusionary policies and whatnot. So those are not the sorts of things that we're getting ourselves involved in. So there's definitely a distinction now, and I would submit that there will be a distinction in the future between those provisions, many of which are not even legal anymore. And certainly the ones, of 100 years ago are unenforceable or principally unenforceable. But that's not the sort of business that we're in with restrictive covenants and other subdivision restrictions.
Thanks, Tim. That was educational and helpful. I guess a good question is, when we enter into these. Well, we don't enter. We do have an agreement. We allow that. We allow infrastructure to be private. I assume that, let's say, developers then don't have to pay assessments for putting in the public components of what would normally be going in, new streets and things, if they're assuming that burden. Well, I suppose there's still sanitary sewers and all those things too. So it's probably a complicated calculus.
Yeah, it has historically varied project to project. We have public water and public sewer. Actually, the Hawks Landing development on the far west side, west of Pleasant View Road, is an interesting example where we have, multiple variations on the theme. We have condominium developments that have private roads, private water, and private sewer. The water and sewer are effectively master metered off of the public mains at a point. And everything is maintained privately. We have another condominium development where they have private roadways, but have public water and public sewer running under them in utility easements dedicated to the city. And so it really can vary project by project. And it's really a development form that we have been discouraging, big difference. Discouraging for roughly the last decade. there was a policy that was adopted by the council after extensive work by the city engineering division that basically said all of the reasons why private infrastructure should be discouraged. And that has largely been something that we've been following since 2012. But there certainly could be instances in the future. There have been instances in the past where, for whatever reason, the city has determined that private infrastructure would be better than public infrastructure, and so that's something that the subdivision regulations have not necessarily kept up with in terms of how they regulate those. So we're just trying to reflect that adopted policy and try to provide more robust guidance for those instances where we are asked to approve private infrastructure for a subdivision.
Thanks. Just one quick comment. Yeah, I guess complete green streets aren't going to happen in private infrastructure necessarily either. And so that's another reason to discourage them, I suppose. I guess the city has to approve whatever it is, but sounds messy. I guess that's my comment. Thanks for putting up with my questions.
Alder Field.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks, Tim, for talking that through. That was very helpful. And I haven't done a full deep dive into the ordinance change yet. My question is about the covenants, the restrictions and covenants on properties and the changes that we would be making now through this ordinance change. Would those changes apply to our handling of all existing restrictive covenants around private infrastructure? Or would this only apply to new restrictions in covenants on new deeds in new projects and new subdivisions?
It would be new going forward.
Sure. Thank you. And then last question, and then I'm done. You mentioned a 2012 policy discouraging private infrastructure. Can you send me more information about that or point me toward where I can read about it?
Sure. I can do both, but it was resolution 12-00453, and it was entitled Approving City of Madison Report Regarding Converting Private Streets to Public Rights-of-Way and Providing City Services to Private Streets. And one of the conclusions of that was that we should discourage private streets, private delivery of services to subdivisions to a greater extent than we had up until that point. But I can send you a link to that if you'd like.
Please do. Thank you very much.
Sure.
That's my last question.
Thank you. Along the covenant lines, my understanding is, and could you clarify this, Tim, and maybe it's in our ordinance, that there cannot be private covenants prohibiting solar panels. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's new language that came about, something that's actually, kind of been, in the area of the stove, but not on a burner for the last couple of years, that this effort provided an opportunity to incorporate. But there was a concern raised, in the county executive's office. I believe they had an intern work on that a couple of years ago, and it was a concern that was shared in the mayor's office that we might have folks that were going to try to restrict the installation of solar arrays through their subdivision covenants. And so this provided an opportunity to provide the language that you see in the code to make that, to the extent possible by law, something that would no longer be permitted. So.
Okay, thank you. Other questions? I'll loop back to the communication that we got that Commissioner Heck was talking about, that from Linda Leonard. She talks about trees and suggests better definitions, and she has a reference in there. And then she also mentioned single trees. And is that something that would be included with this? And I think we all remember, well, those of us who are on the Plan Commission, the walnut tree that was like 300 years old or whatever, and some people called it a witness tree. Would this allow for that kind of protection, or is this just intended to be like a grove of trees? Could you comment on that?
Well, yeah, I think the desire to provide more robust language about tree preservation has been something that we've been wanting to do in the subdivision regulations for a while. We have had instances where the Plan Commission has approved subdivisions with conditions related to tree preservation, even one that went further and even talked about tree planting. And it was all done on a very ad hoc basis. And the language that I'm looking at page 10 of the comparison ordinance under number 4 on that page. It's part of Parent 2, the standards and criteria for approval, but really just trying to provide any shape at all to that. I will admit I was thinking trees plural, not tree singular, in terms of what we were trying to protect, thinking more larger scale development, less so than the 300-year-old black walnut in question at 3706 Nakoma Road that was before the Plan Commission last August. Is the one that's being referenced in Linda Leonard's comments. We are certainly happy to take a look at any additional language that the Plan Commission would like for us to. We can make it so that maybe it's stands of mature trees for subdivisions, or in instances where somebody's proposing a land division, that maybe it's fewer trees or even one tree. So I would say at this rate, we're willing to consider whatever the Plan Commission would like us to report back to them in 2 weeks.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think we should at least take a look at that. So thank you. Alder Figueroa Cole.
I just want to clarify, what is the ask for this item? Is it just informational?
Pardon me? Okay, go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, Alder Figueroa Cole asked what the ask was for this item, and eventually it's going to be a lead recommendation to the Common Council to repeal and recreate Section 16.23 of MGO. For tonight's purposes, however, we're just having an introductory conversation and hearing where the Plan Commission would like us to go in terms of any additional information. Frankly, there was a concern that, if we just introduced it on June 6th, brought it to you on June 12th, and asked you to adopt it, that maybe things would be moving a little too fast for a 60-page section of MGO. So we're doing it in stages. And there's also one other sub-referral that needs to take a look at it before the Plan Commission acts. So tonight, it's just informational for the most part. And then on the 26th, we will be asking if the Plan Commission is ready, of course, for them to make a recommendation on the ordinance.
Okay, I just want to, just a comment. Based on what I have heard so far and based on the communications received for the public, and specifically that email that has so many components to it, I think we kind of mixing too many things in here for this topic to be brought up to council for a vote. I wouldn't say that the speed was fast, but if we're going to be discussing new developments, as other fields was asking earlier, if this is just from new developments happening, that's one thing. But if we're going to start talking about dictating to property owners on, what to do with the trees on their private property, that seems to be like a different type of discussion that will take, more community outreach to have a more, deeper thought on that regard.
No, this is not a tree preservation ordinance for the city overall. This would just be language to guide future subdivisions, and to the extent allowed by law, future land divisions that would come through the city for approval. So, providing more teeth, more guidance for tree preservation as part of that subdivision process. But if we're talking about existing subdivided land, existing developed land, no, that is not what that proposed language is intended to do.
Alrighty, thank you.
Are there further questions? Commissioner Heck.
Thanks. As I was reading page 10 that you referenced, Tim, I started thinking about, are there other aspects of this? I mean, I realize most of it's more technical in nature, but are there other aspects of this change that could have different implications depending upon whether it's a subdivision or a land division? I know it's referenced throughout there, but I'm assuming most of the technical stuff, it really, from what you're guessing, it's probably not different as different as in the hypothetical situation we just discussed.
Well, one thing for certain, land divisions have become more common for new development. I think there might have been a time that predates me, may even predate my existence on Earth, where we were really looking at CSMs as, I've got a slightly larger piece of property that could be divided into another or two other lots, and we're not really talking about needing infrastructure to serve that, really a minor subdivision. But over time, we've seen CSMs be used to provide lots for pretty substantial development. A good recent example that the Plan Commission, or many of the members of the Plan Commission, including you, Patrick, in your previous incarnation as a member of the Common Council and a member of the Plan Commission, at 1601, 1617 Sherman Avenue, where we had a fairly large piece of property that was going to be redeveloped with residential, a street extended in off of Sherman Avenue that might ultimately extend all the way over to Fordham. That development used the 3-lot certified survey map to dedicate that proposed street, create lots for that development, and a sense that we've been conditioning those land divisions robustly, but with not necessarily always having the guidance in 16.23 to maybe condition them as robustly as we can preliminary plats and final plats. So really trying to emphasize that where we have a certified survey map that's being used for many of the same purposes as we would see a subdivision plat, that we're able to condition those to the extent that statutes and administrative codes allow us from the state to, treat those land division instruments with the degree that they need to be when they're doing, significant division of land, significant development or redevelopment of land.
Okay, thanks.
Are there any further questions or suggestions in terms of what happens with this, or other things that should be looked at? Commissioner Shepard.
Yeah, the only thing I'd like to mention is continue to highlight where in this process we can achieve sort of efficiencies, like the one you mentioned earlier in terms of that we stumbled into, it sounds like, due to the pandemic, the electronic submission of the subdivision applications, because it really does sound like this is a lot of work, but there can also be some efficiencies achieved in terms of clarifying, processes and once again, having clear definitions. So I think that's something that you'll deal with the technical stuff, but I think there are overall sort of efficiencies that we can achieve in this. So try to, if possible, sort of keep that in mind. So when we get to the final report and final draft and that sort of thing, we should highlight those because I think that's important. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner. I think what we would be looking for now is a motion to continue the public hearing and refer the ordinance to our June 26th meeting. Do we have a motion? Alder Figueroa call.
I'll give it a try. Motion to move this to the next meeting and to keep the public hearing open until it returns to the committee.
Is there seconded by Alder Duncan? Is there any discussion? Did you wish to speak to your motion, Alder Figueroa call?
No, I think we had discussed that plenty.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion? Seeing no raised hands, we'll come to a vote, and I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hands, motion passes unanimously. Is there any business by members? Seeing no raised hands, we'll go to the secretary's report. Kevin.
Thanks, Chair. In the interest of time, I will give the short version of the report. If there's objections, I can certainly go into more detail on anything if there's questions. I just quickly note the recent Common Council actions. They're noted on the agenda. Among the highlights was the replat of Acacia Ridge, and then the work on the comp plan, the public participation plan, and the interim update actions that you saw a few weeks ago were all approved by the Common Council at their last meeting. The upcoming matters, including the development proposals, are highlighted there. I guess the only thing I would highlight at this point is that next meeting on the 26th is the election of chair and vice chair for the Plan Commission, as well as the formal appointment to the Joint Area Campus Committee and the Transportation Commission. Those are on for next time, but also, a handful of development stuff, both for the 26th and the July 10th meeting. So I'll do the short version. If there's any questions on that, I'm happy to provide more detail, but that's the quick overview.
Okay. Any questions for Kevin? Seeing no raised hands, I'm looking for a motion to adjourn. Motion to adjourn by Commissioner Solheim, seconded by Commissioner Shepherd, and I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hands, we are adjourned. And I will see you then on the 26th. Oh, well, I'll see you on the 22nd before that at the special meeting. So thank you, everybody. Take care.